You know what? I forgot to cue up the intro. Hey everybody, welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast, episode 247. I happen to have forgotten to cue up the intro this week. We've had lots of stuff going on, so I do apologize. This week, we have a episode that we've been wanting to do for, gosh, when did we first talk about this? A month or two ago? About 2 months ago. Today's episode is with my friend Aaron Newkirk, who I used to work with at a grow in Oklahoma. And we're going to talk about some things that have happened to him in his life and how his life has changed a lot in the last couple of months. We also have a surprise medical guest that's going to be joining us as soon as he's able to. We were hoping he could be here already, but it looks like he's running a little bit behind schedule. But he'll also be here a little bit later on to help us sort out this quite complicated conversation that we're going to get into. I wanted to first off preface this episode and just say this is not an anti-vax episode. We both are very much for vaccines. That's how he ended up in the situation that he's in. I also have most of my own vaccines for traveling abroad to Africa and South America. So neither one of us are anti-vaxxers, so don't use this for any of that kind of bullshit. That is not representative of either one of us. That is not what this is about. This episode is going to be about safety of stuff that is currently being pushed on, mostly around the Moderna vaccine, and how we've managed to find quite a few people now, especially after posting this today, that are having severe cannabis-related side effects because of the Moderna vaccine specifically, who had been previously infected with the virus, who then got the vaccine. And like him, he's going to tell you his story firsthand, what he went through. And then there's actually a name for it called THC tachycardia, which is a direct result of some of the stuff that's going on right now. So we're going to talk about that because it isn't being talked about in the cannabis community, and people need to be aware of this information so that they can make informed health decisions. And you should go out there and try to get anything that you can to help protect your local community. But you should also use your brain and make sure the science is sound on it and the situation that you have with your own medical situation before you go rush and get anything. I don't care what it is. I'm going to talk about that today because it very much relates to the cannabis community as a whole, and it isn't being talked about. So we're going to hear both from someone with a PhD a little later on this, and then in the meantime, we're going to talk to Aaron. So. Aaron, why don't you introduce yourself? He used to work with me. I used to help manage a farm there, and he used to be one of our workers that would help work with the plants in the greenhouse and transplant stuff and take clones. And so that's how I got to know him. And then since then, we've become friends, and we like to hang out together. His girlfriend and I, and my girlfriend and I, and the four of us like to go out and hang out and do stuff, go to the lake, and we've become friends. And then he had a life-changing event happen to him a couple months ago when he was visiting Colorado. So why don't you tell us a little about yourself and then kind of what happened?
Okay. What's up, guys? I'm Aaron, 26 years old. And basically my whole life has changed. I went from smoking 2 grams concentrates a day to not smoking anything. I used to host my own cannabis podcast. Since then, I've kind of taken a break from that, but I only got the vaccine because we were going to be traveling to Colorado, and I was told that you had to have it to get on a plane, which I later come to find out that wasn't true. They didn't ask for anything when we went to go board the plane. So everything all started about 3 days after I got my second shot. Started feeling like this slight twinge in my chest every now and then, and it was after I'd get through smoking. A couple of days after that is when I really felt it. I smoked pretty decent size dab hit, and then couple minutes later, I started feeling real weird, kind of disoriented. I got really, really hot, but my skin was ice cold. I was pale white, and I had like this terrible pain in my chest on the left side. My arm kind of started to hurt a little bit. I honestly thought I was having a heart attack the first time it happened. And I went to the ER. I left work immediately, went to the ER, and they really didn't take me seriously. Once I mentioned marijuana, it was like, okay. And they basically told me that I was just having a really bad panic attack. So I left the hospital that night with that, and I ended up going back to the hospital the very next night for the same thing. So I didn't think it was a panic attack. So I called a cardiologist here in town and went and saw him. I've done stress tests. I've had to wear a heart monitor. Pretty much anything they can do to check my heart, I've done it. He really can't find anything wrong with my heart. But he knows and he saw that it's there. And another thing that has been affected is my blood pressure has always been perfect. And now I'm usually, when they test it, and I actually have a blood pressure monitor at home now too, my blood pressure is always like right in that stage 1 hypertension, always. And my sitting heart rate when I went to the hospital in Colorado was 107, and I was laying on bed. It wasn't that high when I did my stress test on the treadmill. Since then, I've kind of changed how I ate and been exercising a little bit more, and I have noticed a little bit of a difference. But every day, it's still like I feel that twinge in my chest, get minor chest pains, my heart will start to pound out of nowhere. And like I said, I check my blood pressure pretty much every day, and my blood pressure's been going down, but I've also been on blood pressure medication. I also take beta blockers now every day. And I can't smoke. Every time I've tried to smoke, I've done edibles, I ended up going to the hospital every single time. The only thing I've been able to do that I found helps is like I have CBD and CBG flower. Those don't really bother me too much, but it's just, I'm a concentrate guy. I don't like the way the burning flower tastes of any sort, so I just haven't smoked at all.
And that kind of goes back to what Kevin was saying about it being more attributed to THC. That's really the trigger. And I don't really understand the mechanism of it, but it seems to be mainly people that have previously been infected that get vaccinated after being infected and then taking higher concentrations of THC. In fact, entirely separate from this, without the guy even knowing, earlier today, I was talking to an investor that I work with on a separate project who lives in Florida. And he is also having heart issues anytime he does concentrates now. He can smoke lower quality flower and some joints and stuff like that, but he can't smoke dabs at all without his heart just racing after getting vaccinated. And there's very clearly something going on here that is affecting people, and specifically THC. And we don't know what's going on. This needs to be researched, right? It doesn't mean that if you have not been infected, you shouldn't get it. It doesn't mean that, if they come up with a different one later on that doesn't have these side effects, that you shouldn't get it. It just means that that we need to just understand what the hell is going on here, because people are having their lives dramatically affected. I mean, how many episodes did you guys have of your podcast? We were on one of the episodes as well. In fact,
we were right on our second season when everything happened. Yep. So probably about 20 episodes or so. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's been rough, dude. I mean, like I said, I'm 26 and I take blood pressure medication every day and beta blocker. And even my doctor, when he gave me everything, and when we were talking, he said that I was the youngest person he's ever seen with this kind of issue. Like he said that he's seen people be affected by the vaccine and have similar things, but he said everybody that he's seen was over the age of 50, and I'm not 30. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know that I've had a poor diet and I haven't really been the most active with my exercise and everything, but I didn't think that it was going to affect me that way. And I mean, I would have never got the vaccine if I'd have known that this is how it was going to end up being. Because, truth be told, I didn't have to have it apparently to get on the airplane, so it really did me no good as far as I'm concerned. And see, at first I thought maybe it was just BHO products or CRC products. So when I went to Colorado, I tried to smoke there too. I went and bought like the best rosin that you could get on the medical side. I had a friend go buy it for me, and the first hit that I took, I felt all right. I mean, there was a little bit there, but nothing like what it had been. The second hit, though, man, I thought I was going to die. Like, my heart was just pounding, like so hard you could see it. And I went to the hospital up there and talked to a doctor, and she said the same thing that the doctor here had said. And like I said, I just thought it was from like, residuals left over or dirty product or something. But after a little bit more research on it, it's.
And you were able to find other people that have had your issue. Why don't you talk about that? Because I think, again, when you told me this was wholly new and scary news to me when there was this link between cannabinoids and heart events and the vaccine, and it's something that just wholly is being buried either on media or is just not being discussed enough. But it has, even has a name. You know what I mean? And when I talked to Kevin about this earlier today, he was immediately, all about it. So we're gonna hopefully have him joining us here in a little bit. But it seems like if all 5 people that I personally have talked to or secondhand talked to, one or the other, I personally have spoken to 2 of them in person or on the phone. The other 3 we've spoken through the people that he's found. Are people that, again, directly linked to people that were infected, then got the Moderna vaccine, and were cannabis smokers. That seems to be the combo that seems to be getting people into issues. But not everyone is. There's lots of people that have posted on Instagram and on Facebook today that they got the vaccine and didn't have issues, but there certainly are for some people, and it seems to be that small segment of people that meet that kind of weird set of criteria.
Yeah. Like I said, both of the doctors that I talked to said they had seen it before, but everybody that they had seen it in was all these older people, at least 40 to 50 years old or older. They'd never seen anybody in my age be affected by something like that. And I don't have an explanation for it. I mean, I don't know. And I mean, I haven't got to talk to anybody that actually seems like they really know either, So hopefully Kevin can kind of shed some light on what's going on, because I feel like people need to know. And I feel like maybe more of the doctors need to know. But they can tell you that it's happening, but they can't tell you why. And to me, that doesn't sit right with me. It's like I said, my whole life's been completely changed. And there's really nothing I can do about it that I know of. But hell, my wife here, she even got the same vaccine I got at the same time, and she wasn't affected by anything. I mean, she still smokes every day. So I don't know.
Talk talk a little bit louder or a little bit, the mic's not picking up 100%. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what happened when you why don't you walk, because you were starting to tell me about it and I had to kind of stop you because you were very much telling me. So walk us through what happened that day and kind of you know, how you figured out that cannabis was causing it afterwards.
Well, like I said, after the first time, I thought I would try it again just to make sure that's, what it was, because I had gotten, I work at a dispensary, so we get samples of things. I had gotten a sample of something that I found to not be what the guy was claiming it was. What he had done is he had actually taken somebody else's container and testing and just slapped his own label over the top of it. Same strain and everything, just not what it was originally. So at first, I was thinking that maybe he just had some residuals or something like that left over. Maybe he had dirty neem oil in his product, or I don't know. But then, like I said, I even smoked stuff that I was used to smoking. I smoked stuff that I already had at the house, and it did the same thing. And then I tried taking some edibles, same thing. Honestly, the edibles hit me worse than smoking concentrates. It took a little bit longer. It wasn't like immediate because I had taken an edible, and then all of us from work, we had went out to eat. I sat through the whole dinner and everything was perfectly fine. It was when we got ready to leave that it hit me, and my heart started pounding again. I felt really weak. I was really shaky. And I told her, I said, we're going to have to go back to the hospital. So we did. And same thing. They just told me it was another panic attack. But I didn't buy that. I've had panic attacks.
You don't go from dabbing like half a gram to a gram a day and then having that type of panic attack suddenly. That's just bullshit.
Yeah. And I don't know, man. I don't know how to explain it. I just want to know what's wrong and if it's ever going to go back to normal.
Well, hopefully we'll have some insight on that here in a little bit. What else, I guess, have you learned in that time? You said you had talked to some of the people, seen some of the people post. What were they saying?
I've just been reading like forums for people with heart conditions and just kind of seeing how they live, what they do, what they eat, because I was used to doing what I wanted. I was used to, if I wanted to go eat a hamburger or eat 3 hamburgers in one day, I could do that. Was it healthy? No. But now I actually have to watch everything I eat because I've read that there are certain foods that can, make your heart rate faster, raise your blood pressure, blah, 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 all that. So I've been trying to really work on that. Trying to eat more, I guess, heart healthy foods, and really just been trying to figure out what I can do to live a somewhat normal life, I guess, without having to worry about being in pain. I mean, because I don't know how to explain it, but I'm almost scared to try smoking again because I've been through some pain in my life, but that hurt. Like, I really thought that my heart was just going to jump out of my chest. I mean, it really hurt. And the last time I smoked, it had me down for 3 days. Like, I couldn't eat. I couldn't hardly sleep. It was just, I felt terrible. I don't want to feel that way. So that's why I've been trying to kind of do better things. And the last time I went and seen my doctor, the only thing he could really suggest was that I be more active, that I need to lose weight And but this whole time, what confuses me is this whole time he's been telling me, he's like, the cannabis shouldn't have any effect on you. If you want to smoke, you can smoke. You know, I tried it, and it does the same thing every single time. And I told him that he can't find a reason why it would be doing it. I don't know.
No, like I said, Kevin seemed to know right away that it was a, you know, hold on, let me make sure I read it right. THC tachycardia. Sorry, hold on. THC tachycardia, yeah, which is, again, seems to mysteriously manifest itself in that scenario. So again, something that if you have that specific set of circumstances, maybe look at getting a different vaccine. If you are going to get vaccinated, you know, steer clear of the Moderna one. Maybe look at the Johnson & Johnson or one of the other ones if that's something that you feel you need to do. You know, me personally, I'm waiting until they actually have the science figured out completely. But if I have to get it to travel internationally, then I'll probably look at the Johnson & Johnson if I'm forced to, you know, at that point business-wise. But I'd rather wait and let them figure it out personally. But that's just my personal opinion on that. I just think that they need more time because of people like you. You know, I was actually pretty much at the point of where I pretty much went, okay, we've had 6 months of pretty good run. But after a year, it's like, okay, maybe they do need a little bit more. Or at the very least, maybe I'm not going to get one of the first or second gen ones. Maybe I'll get one of the newer ones that have come out more recently. You know? So that's the thing that seems so scary to me, and something that, like, again, I personally know directly 2 different people, an investor and Aaron, that are having these exact same symptoms. Now, the other guy is only having it with concentrates, but he's having almost identical symptoms to Aaron, where he has extreme heart rate increase and spiked blood pressure from smoking concentrates. He can't even dab right now. So, you know, this is something that needs to be studied. It needs research, and we got to figure out why, and so that people don't, you know, accidentally make themselves sick. And it certainly, you know, scared the shit out of me when I heard about it. And I think a lot of people listening to this are, you know, heard about it. So tell us about you kind of touched on it earlier, but you went through the doctors up in Colorado and in Oklahoma, 2 separate places, where they, you know, did the full suite of trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with you, and neither one of them do it. And what did they link it to? What did they say?
The lady in Colorado that I saw, she was actually the first one to mention to me, because right before I was getting ready to leave, you know, they had done 2 EKGs before I left. They checked my blood pressure 3 times, done blood work, everything like that. Right when I was getting ready to leave, she come back in the room and she said, "Have you had your vaccination?" And I said, "Yeah." And she looked at me and she was like, "That's probably it." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I've seen a couple of other people, and after they were vaccinated, they had similar issues." She said, "You're not the first person, especially being in Colorado, you know."
Yeah.
And she was like, "So what I would recommend," obviously she told me to go see another doctor once I got home, but she said, "I would recommend giving it at least a month to kind of see, let that kind of run its course. And then she said I would try again. I haven't. Since all that, I have not smoked at all. I haven't even tried. And honestly, it's not that bad. Like, it sucks, but it's not nearly as bad as thinking that something could really go wrong if I do, you know. So I think I'm just scared at this point, but still, what I did go through during that was enough for me to just not really care, I don't know. So like I said, I've went and seen cardiologists, and that's what he had said. He was like, he said that actually one of his nurses at the clinic where I went had the same issue. After she got the vaccine, she started having severe tachycardia. So who knows, man? I mean, they've given me a diagnosis, but not an explanation. So I don't know. I don't. That's what I'm hoping to find out. I mean, why did the vaccination affect me? But I know at least 4 other people that are heavy smokers that it didn't do anything. So that's been my number one question ever since this happened.
Especially Taylor's, because you guys both have got infected at the same time. You both had previously been infected, got the same vaccine, and had radically different effects.
Yeah, like with her, man, she didn't get sick or anything even after the shot. With me, I felt worse the day after I got the shot than I did when we were diagnosed with COVID. Like when I had COVID, the only symptoms I really had were I lost taste and smell, and at the like very first day or two, I had like a really bad sinus. It felt like a sinus infection, and I was running a slight fever. After the first day or two, I felt fine. I didn't have fever. I literally just had no taste or smell for about 2 weeks, and then I felt fine. And I wasn't bothered, didn't have any issues, was still smoking the whole time I had COVID. The only thing, they would hurt my throat a little bit when I smoked, but no issues like this. And then, like I said, after I got the first shot, I felt perfectly fine, was still smoking, still doing my podcast, everything. And then the second shot, it only took about 3 days. And after about that third day, like I said, I took probably a half gram dab, and which wasn't out of the ordinary for me. And then I felt terrible. I felt like I had no energy, and I just started shaking and everything. And I don't know. It was just a feeling that I've never had before, ever. And I'd actually seen the cardiologist that I'm seeing now. I'd seen him when I was a kid for a heart murmur, but everything had kind of run its course and went away. So I don't have like any previous heart conditions or anything like that. Like as far as he can tell from all my EKGs, my stress tests and everything, like I have no issues. There's no clogged arteries or anything like that. He said that as far as he could see from everything, my heart is just as healthy as it can be. But there's definitely something there that's not right. And now every time that I check it, except for today was kind of weird. Every time I've checked my blood pressure since my last appointment about 2.5 weeks ago, my blood pressure's been high. And today when I checked it, it was actually really good, and my pulse was only at 77, not 100. So something I'm doing has been making it go down. But there's no reason my resting heart rate should be over 100. I could understand if I was moving or running or something like that, but when I went to the doctor in Colorado, my resting heart rate was almost 120. And that's just ridiculous to me, because I believe that the normal heart rate should be like between 60 and 100, no higher. So that scared me. And they thought in Colorado that the reason my blood pressure and everything was high was just from elevation. So I took that into consideration, and I thought maybe, okay, yeah, it could just be the elevation messing with me. But then when I got home and things didn't change, I knew it wasn't just the elevation messing with me at that point. My blood pressure was still high the last 2 times I went to the doctor. And I want to say it was like 141 over 84 or something like that. And then the last couple days when I've been checking it, it's been 150 over like 89 or some shit. And my heart rate's been anywhere from 98 to 101. But today, like I said, when I checked it, it was actually better. It was like 150 over 79, and my heart rate was 77. So I mean that was actually really good. I was actually really happy about that. And all I know is that I would like to get back to my normal life. You know, I know that I'll probably never be able to smoke like that again if I'm ever able to smoke concentrates ever again. But it would be nice to just be able to not have to worry about things like I was before. I mean, not have to worry about eating something or drinking something that, you know, is going to make my heart just race for no reason. And I've kind of read up on some foods and even drinks that can do that to you, and there's not that many.
And we were talking about this a little bit before the show. I was having some strange heart palpitations when I had COVID, because we're pretty sure him and I got COVID at the same event that we were at. We were at a private event. I'll leave it at that. It was a small private event. It was like 5 or 6 people, but we were hanging out. We made the stupid decision of sharing a blunt, and it is what it is. You know, that was definitely one of the side effects that I had, was that when I was doing dabs, I certainly had some heart issues there where my heart felt strange. And I know that she would tell you, there's 2 or 3 nights where I'd like lay down on the bed and just kind of like do some breathing exercises. Like, thankfully, my uncle taught me a lot about when I used to do a lot of diving and free diving in the summertime. I used to stay with my uncle in Florida when I was a kid. And we used to do a lot of free diving, and he taught me how to, you know, through breathing exercises, you can slow down your heart rate through long breathing. Same thing, another way to do it if you're trying to like figure this out and you're just like stressed out, didgeridoos. That long rhythmic breathing of doing a didgeridoo will calm the living shit out of you and slow your heart rate down. And it's super healing for that too. So think about as if you were playing a didgeridoo. Doing that type of long breathing exercises can help slow the heart rate down. If you're ever having a panic attack, or maybe you take too much of something that's speeding your heart rate up, or maybe you just get overly excited, or maybe you just had some like crazy, maybe you just, you know, hydroplaned or something and spun around a bunch and your heart rate's just going, or, you know, some other thing like that. You can do those long rhythmic breathing exercises and it will help slow your heart rate down quite a bit. Yes, and cats. We definitely have, in fact, there's one within vision, and there's a dog at my feet as well. So fur babies are definitely good for stress.
I have a cat at the house, and she helps me.
But yeah, definitely something that, you know, even those that have COVID, and there's other people in chat saying that they're, you know, they have long COVID and afterwards, and they're having similar issues, and it's like, you know, all of, you know, but why is it that you know, okay, maybe that's a bad way to frame it, but like, there's a lot of overlap in symptoms here that are all around COVID and COVID. The vaccine with that same immune response, right? Like the vaccine's causing that, whatever that trigger is for that, it's very clearly causing that same problem as the actual disease is. So we got to figure out, and it just needs to be like shown that, hey, this thing exists. Now we need to go research it so that we can figure out why and stop it, right? It's not about causing hysteria. It's not about being anti-vax. I think anyone that says everyone should get every vaccine is equally as stupid as everyone that gets no vaccines, right? You need to look at your own personal medical history and get the ones that make sense to you and avoid the ones that might cause you severe medical problems. And most people can get the majority of them. Let's just be honest. Whether or not that aligns with your personal beliefs is a separate issue. But when we're talking strictly about medical stuff, that's kind of where I travel too much internationally. I wish I had the option of foregoing more of them personally, just on my personal heavy beliefs. But I get them because it's the responsible thing to do when I have to travel. And if I want access to certain parts of the world tough titties, that's what I have to do, right? So, and just like he did, he thought he had to have it for travel, right? He is trying to do the right thing, trying to be part of the bigger picture there, and then his whole life has changed. You know, he works for cannabis. He's worked in the cannabis industry for years now, and you know, it's hard for him sometimes. And I don't know, maybe you want to talk about that on a positive note for a minute on kind of the Oklahoma scene and the product scene and kind of, you know, what's going out there.
Yeah, I've been in the industry for almost 2 years now, and you know, I've done everything from processing to growing to now working in a dispensary, and I've seen some of the products that go out, and you know, there's some that I feel like really do help people, and then there's other people that I feel like their main goal is not to really help people, but more to make a dollar. And the people that make the products that are actually trying to help people, that's more what I like to see go out. You know, and I try really hard to educate people, but I found that it's not as easy as, yeah, that's, you know, working in a dispensary, you get people, what's the highest THC or what's it? Well, first off, let me ask you, what exactly are you looking for it to do? That's usually my first question to people that are, especially if I get the feeling that they're probably new to this. That's my first question. Well, what are you looking to get out of this? Like, are you looking for pain relief? Or are you looking for anxiety relief? What are you looking? 9 times out of 10, the only thing they can tell me is, well, I don't like sativas, or I want indicas, or I don't like indicas. And I found that a lot of these people just want to get high. And that's cool too, you know, whatever. But for me, when I was smoking, it wasn't just to get high, because, you know, after so long of smoking just concentrates, and, you know, you build up that tolerance to where it's like, okay, well, am I really getting high, or am I just doing this because it's something to do and I'm used to it? That's really where I was. Like, I wasn't getting stoned like I wanted to. And then when I started doing more research on like CBG and CBD and the things that they can help with, that's more what I started looking at, was things that were higher in that. Like, you can get, you know, you can get rosin capsules and things of that nature, RSO, stuff like that, that can really actually help with pain relief more than it will just get you fucked up. And that for me is where I was at. Like, I like CBG a lot. It really helps as far as, like, I have arthritis pretty bad. I have also a condition in my back called spinal arthrosis, which is how it's been explained to me. It's like tiny bone spurs on the spine, and there's really not a whole hell of a lot they can do about it. But CBG does help. It helps with the inflammation and everything of the joints. So I try to look for things, well, I don't anymore, but I tried to look for things that were higher in CBG. And I've actually got some CBG flower at the house that I was smoking on before I stopped smoking. And it tastes terrible. But I did notice the difference in how I felt once I smoked it. And that's why I got into the cannabis industry. It was really just to help people. I'm not the biggest people person. I don't really care for people too much. But I definitely still like to help people. And
so what are some of the, I guess, what are some of the product trends, or what are some of the, you don't necessarily have to go into brands, but like, what are some of the different products that you prescribe to people? Or when I was working in the first year in Oklahoma, up north in Tulsa, a lot of times a large percentage of our people had a lot of pain or wanted to sleep. One of those two, right? That was probably 60 to 70% of our customers wanted one of those two things. What's kind of the breakdown in demographic, maybe age-wise, and then also like what types of categories of products are these people seeking on a regular basis? Maybe let's start off with age and then move on with the products.
Well, I mean,
Oklahoma seemed to me the first year was like, I was, was predominantly people over the age of 50 more than any other demographic.
that's what I was about to say. Most of the people that I see that want it for pain or, sleep, most of them are going to be, in my experience, they're mostly women. And a lot of them are probably age, we'll say 35 and up. And a lot of them that I deal with they're new to this. I see a lot of older people that you can tell they never would have touched cannabis before it was legal. And it's funny to see how some of them react to being told what they need versus what they want. Like, some of them are laughable, but I try not to make fun of people. But I always try to tell them, especially the older ones, you would benefit more from like CBD than you're going to from a high content of THC. The high content of THC is probably going to spike that anxiety you were telling me about. Like, but a lot of people don't want to listen to that. A lot of people still just, at the end of the day, their only question is, even after you go over the whole spiel, well, what's the THC percentage? Okay, take what you want. Okay. And then indica sativa, like for me, I don't think that matters.
Well, and most of the time when people are referring to indica versus sativa in a retail space, they basically want, how much myrcene does this have? Because myrcene, it helps you make you kind of drowsy and sleepy and couch lock. Myrcene's the couch lock term, right? So how much myrcene is more or less what it is? Because you can have broadleaf or narrow leaf sativas or indicas on both directions in terms of genetics. And if you really get down to it, there's the narrow leaf drug producing, wide leaf drug producing, narrow leaf fiber producing, wide leaf fiber producing, blah, blah, blah. And they've reclassified the genomics on them, or the Latin breakdown of the ruderalis and sativa and indica. I think they just did another revision on that in the last 2 or 3 years. Anyways, so you're far better off using things like terpene percentages and how much of the different terps, because certain terp profiles, like we found, especially we work with multiple pediatric seizure patients, and we found the right ratio for that patient, which you got to do a little bit of tweaking on, of THC to CBD plus the additional linalool really helped suppress seizures in kids that otherwise are not responsive to medication. In fact, there's 2 of them that we directly supply right now. And without us, I don't know what they'll do for their medicine. Like we're kind of their main supplier. So that's the type of stuff that I'm proud to do, and that's why we got into this in the first place. This is why I dedicated my career to this stuff, is to help kids like that. I think all of you guys have heard me say 4 or 5 times, if you've listened to the podcast, my story about the kid at the Aquaponic source, walking in and being strapped to his stroller and coming back 3 months later and smashing all the 8-ounce and 1-ounce shot glasses that we use for measuring glasses, and smashing them on the tile floor and giggling every time he smashes one. And I paid for all of them out of my wallet because I could not stop crying because how happy I was to see that kid smash glass like a joyous little boy would destroy stuff, right? Like, that kid was strapped to his stroller the last time I seen him, and he couldn't recognize that the world existed, better yet enjoy it. And if you can have that kind of impact on someone's life, fuck anything else. Like, why would you even remotely consider doing anything else as a career? That to me was like, okay, this is my direction in life, done. Next thing. Like, I've never had a clearer decision in my life.
And see, there's been a couple people that I've been able to sit down and talk with, and they may be in the shop for an hour, 2 hours, and we're just sitting there talking. I really try to get to know, like I said, what it is they need it for, because like you said, terpenes is what really matters. And if you can figure out what terpenes respond well with your body, then you've got it made. Like, you know exactly what you need. you know, what it's going to do. And it bugs me with people that are like, well, that's not what he said, or that everybody's going to interpret that different because your body is going to intake it.
But also think about it, a lot of other dispensaries don't care about the patients the way that you do, especially being someone that's gone through the shit that you've gone through. You kind of have a different perspective on, like, this is medicine, I'm not here to hustle. Whereas a lot of other dispensaries are out there, and I'm not just trying to push Yellow House or whatever I'm saying this, but I'm just saying that, like, a lot of other bud tenders, and I don't mean that against Yellow House, they're a great dispensary, but you know, a lot of other bud tenders are just trying to sell the highest dollar one, which is always the highest THC, right? So, like, of course they're going to tell you that's the one you need, right? Like, it's financially in their benefit. Whereas when you have a good, and this is why anytime I do consulting on any dispensary, what's the thing I tell them they have to have? An education space. You have to have a classroom if you're a good dispensary. Why? You do your 2 or 3 times a week free education classes, and then you allow other cannabis friendly businesses or associated companies or seminars or just cannabis friendly community anything to utilize the space. It brings in people, but also if you're the point of education, people get the right information, you can provide it on a regular basis, but 2, you build brand loyalty to your dispensary as well, because if you're the people that educated them on the cannabis medicine, and then it's backed up by the fact that that shit works, they're never going to go to another dispensary again. They will never even look at another dispensary sign because you're the one that helped them, right? And I think that is far more valuable to people. Yeah, I mean, you always have people that are trying to, like, oh man, I only got this much to spend this week and I got to make it work, whatever. But the vast majority of people, especially the older folks that you're talking about, if you're that point of education, you know, again, they're going to be loyal to you, and that's really what it comes down to. But also you can provide the time in that space to help people, right? So,
And we really try not to, we don't try to hound people, but we do try to get to know what their needs are, and we listen to our customer. That's the big thing that I've found is, like, if you listen to your customers and let them tell you what they want, and you actually can get that for them, that right there shows that you really do care about them. And, you know, we've got a lot of patients that come in with PTSD, anxiety, things of that nature, and, you know, we carry some strains. We also carry just pure CBD flower. We carry CBG flower. But we got a strain here a couple weeks ago that is, from everything I can find on it, is specifically formulated for people with PTSD. And everybody that's tried it has come back. So I know it works. And, you know, that's the thing. I'm not trying to upsell these people. I'm not trying to just sell them what I want to sell. You know, now if somebody just tells me, hey, I just want to get high, then yeah, I'll sell you something that's going to definitely just get you high. But if you tell me that you're having issues or that you're having this or that, like, I'm going to do my best to try to give you what it is you need that's not going to mess with your head or, you know, cause you more anxiety than what you already have. Because pushing somebody that has bad anxiety, or pushing something that's high THC with little to no CBD or anything else in it, you're just going to make it worse. And then, you know, when I first got into the industry, I'd heard of bud tenders giving people 1,000 milligram like chocolate bars and things like that. And when the person asked, how do I dose it? They told them to eat the whole thing. So she did. And it damn near killed her. Like,
well, it wouldn't kill her, but
she thought
she'll sleep for a couple days.
It gave her a fucking severe panic attack. She was an old lady.
Oh yeah, Jesus Christ, that's the most reckless shit I've ever heard.
I've never understood that. Like,
why would you tell an old lady to take that? Like, I can remember the first. Well, okay, take this back. I probably shouldn't say this. I can remember trying to help an old lady once, and giving her a chocolate bar, but it was broken out like the same way a Hershey bar was. And I said, take one square and wait an hour. And if you don't feel anything, take one more square and wait an hour. And then if you still don't feel, like, do it that way. And then spend like an afternoon where this is what you're doing for the afternoon. And what did she do? She waited until she had a couple of drinks with her lady friends. Oh, they were hanging out, having a girls' night at the house, and the four of them split the bar. I get a call at like 3 a.m. and she's like panic vomiting in the bathroom with her and her three old lady friends. And they're trying to ask me how to like undo it. So I was like, listen, peppercorn and mint, and y'all need like a cool shower, and y'all will be good in like 45 minutes. And they all did that, and they brought them all down. But yeah, so if you guys want to make an antidote for your cannabinoids, for those of you that are into solventless extract, you guys are going to love this. Spearmint, or most of your mint varietals, but particularly spearmint and most of your common garden mints, have large trichome heads, or decently large trichome heads, that actually have the main ingredient to help pull THC out of your blood. So you can actually collect a whole bunch of bubble hash, more or less, 1 to 3% return, not a whole lot, but a small return on mint. So you'll get a 1 to 3% return on mint in a form of a mint bubble hash. That is not only incredibly amazing if you're into like flavor crafting for making super high minty flavored stuff. It's also really good for putting under someone's tongue if they take entirely too much THC. It's kind of a bit of an antidote, along with peppercorns. You can take peppercorns and also put them under the tongue, and it will help drop the THC out of your blood. CBD is another one. You can dab or take a high amount of CBD, and that will also help drop the THC out of your blood and help you sober up faster. So that is something you can do if you take that much. But you should, especially if you are non-experienced, you should not be mixing alcohol and cannabis until you are used to them separately, because that's a whole separate animal. And then if you start screwing with your uptake of either one, it will dramatically shift that again. So if you're taking some very high-end edible products, some of them can get pretty dicey when it comes to mixing them with alcohol, and not only just because of the milligrams, but because of how it also alters alcohol uptake in extreme cases. But that's a
funny story. We were talking about that older woman. My mom has her medical card and everything. She's never smoked before, ever. At least 2 to 3 separate occasions when I've got her to smoke with me, it never ends well. One time I got her to smoke a joint with me out in the car, and she had like a reaction to where I don't know, it was almost like she was having a seizure is what it seemed like to me. Like her whole body started to shake, and she just, every time she passes, like smooth the fuck out. And so there was that time. There was another time where I had to carry her to her car after she had taken a hit off my dab pen. And the most recent time was she come over to our house. I believe it was the day that me and Taylor got married. And we were all sitting around and we were doing like taking edibles, doing dabs. I had bought a high terpene full spectrum syringe from Apothecary. You know, I've been doing it all day, and you know, she makes her own edibles out of flour that I'd given her. So I know that, you know, she did it. But I put probably 0.1, 0.2 of a gram inside of a muffin, and I'd given it to her. Well, she ate it, and we were all sitting around and everything. Well, she went outside to go smoke a cigarette, and I think that's really what onset this. But while she was smoking her cigarette, she started to get a little pale, and she said, I don't feel very good. I think I'm going to throw up. And she did. And after she threw up, she like completely passed out. And I mean, like, you could slap her and everything, and she didn't move. And it really scared me. So me and a friend, we carried her back in the house, and we set her down on the couch. She kind of woke up and looked at, her eyes were just bloodshot as could be. She kind of woke up and looked at me, and she couldn't talk though, like, or she wouldn't talk, one of the two. But 4.5 hours later, she woke up just enough to get up and walk to her car and have my dad drive her home. Like, it was something else, man. I mean, she won't smoke with me anymore now. Like, not that I smoke anymore, but up until, like, she wouldn't smoke with me. And I've never seen anybody with that kind of reaction to cannabis. Like, I've seen people that would throw up. I've seen people that would get paranoid and things like that. But she's the first person I've ever seen that literally just, she acts like her body is fully rejecting the cannabis. Like, I don't know.
I used to have my buddy's ex-wife used to not get high. Like, so we used to have a big, giant party for 420. We used to get everyone together. You had to bring an ounce of weed and an item for the potluck in order to like get into the party. And like that was more or less, we wouldn't turn you away, but that was kind of the suggestion basically. And then we would take all the weed and grind it all up so that we all had like all the different poo-poo platter strains. And I would break out my full glass collection because back in those days I had like over 100 glass pieces when I lived in the East Coast, allegedly. And used to pack all of everything up, and then I would cook a giant turkey, usually bacon wrapped, and we do a giant potluck, and everyone would bring sides. And my buddy's wife sat there and smoked weed with everybody. Everyone's like passing the fuck out, like 30, 40 people. We hotbox usually one room in the house, and she just sat there sober as you know. She just woke up in the morning after smoking like 4 pounds of weed with everybody, like collectively. It was complete insanity. I've never seen anybody. She's the only person my whole life who's just like straight immune to weed. But I witnessed it with my own 2 eyes. Like, it's the only person. My buddy's ex, Tammy. Not with her anymore, but he knows who he is if he listens to the show. I won't get into it. His old handle, well, I should be careful. Anyways, he's a good friend of mine. It's all right. We're not talking shit, but she was immune to weed for sure.
Yeah, dude,
so what are some of the different strain trends in Oklahoma? You know, you work in the retail space, so what are some of the strains that we're seeing? What's popular? What's been popular last couple months?
For us, man, we really try to be a little different than everybody else. We try mostly to go after strains that other people don't have. So like, for instance, some of our better strains right now, we have one fucking killer flower, huge nugs, nice dents. Smells just like pink lemonade. It's called Pink Gorilla. That's been one of our best sellers here recently. A lot of people, like, we've had Bruce Banner, obviously people know that strain. Chocolope, which is a strain I'd never really heard of before, but apparently people know what it is. But like I guess the most sought after strain that we have that I guess more people would have is going to be Gorilla. That's a pretty common strain I feel like most people have. But as far as like keeping things that most people like are used to, we really try not to. We try to be different. We don't want to be selling the same thing that everybody else is. Like, we outsource a lot of our people from like up by Tulsa. We have a grow that we get. We're the only dispensary in Durant that gets this flower. we grow called Black Label Organics. We get a lot of their flower, and they have just off the wall strains that I've never even heard of before. Some of the better strains we've gotten from them were like we've had a strain called Lysol, we've had Death Breath, Forbidden Fruit Gelato. That was a really good one.
Now, do you guys, people asking Chad, do you guys have your own grow, or do you guys just
Not yet. We are working on that. Well, that's coming, but not yet. Currently, we just have 2 stores. We have one here in Durant, and then we have another in Tahlequah, which is there's actually a backstory behind Yellow House. So the Red Dirt singer Jason Boland,
yep,
he actually used to record at a place in Tahlequah that is famous for basically setting the red dirt scene. You know what I mean? Pretty much anybody that's ever been in Oklahoma as far as red dirt, they've all recorded there. So that's where Yellow, and it's an actual Yellow House, and that's where the name came from. And for people that don't know, Jason is actually one of our owners. So you don't see him a whole lot, but he is there. But yeah, we're working on it, and there's a possibility there's going to be one more store coming up too as well. So I'm really excited about that. Hopefully that'll be up and going by, at least the grow should be up and going by, I'd say probably the middle of next year. But it is something we're talking about. We're looking for places to set up shop. But we get our flower from all over the place right now. I mean, we've got the pink gorillas coming from a grow in Duncan. We've got some flower that's grown right here in Durant. Heavenly Haze, we get flower from them. There's a company out of Medill that we get our flower from called Cannabis. They have pretty decent flower. But Black Label and Red Dirt Rays, those are probably our two biggest that we get from right now, and they have some amazing flower. So I'm prepared to see what the Yellow House grow is going to have, though. I mean, because it's going to be really cool to be able to grow our own and see it go from a seed to sale. You know what I mean? That's going to be really cool, and I like the idea of knowing exactly what's going into the products that we're going to be selling to our patients. That way, there's no question. Carter Creek Cannabis? I don't think so.
about Jinx Proof?
I haven't heard of that one either.
What are some of the other trends you see going on in the Oklahoma scene? Like, what have you seen kind of change over time? And then also, I know some of the other stuff that you've kind of seen around the industry.
I'm starting to see more solventless coming, and I called it. I told people whenever I was doing like processing and stuff, I was like, you guys, we need to get on the solventless train, because that's where it's going to go. And now we're kind of getting closer to that being where we're at, and I'm really happy about that, because solventless is, yes, it's a little more expensive, but it's so worth it.
That fire though.
It is so worth it.
Yep. No, we we always splurge for the extra, but now well, it's been a while since we've had to buy anything. But, on the off chance that we do have to buy it, if I'm out of state or whatever, I always buy that fresh frozen rosin, and that white creamy rosin, usually like horribly overpriced, but totally worth it.
Man, we've got some stuff right now, both, as I mentioned, Black Label. Both of the rosin companies that we carry at the moment, we get them because Black Label gave them the flower to process. So right now we carry Leaf Logic, which I know a lot of people know who Leaf Logic is. They're one of the leading rosin companies in Oklahoma right now. We don't have Icy Melts. That'd be really nice to get. Another good one is Country Hash. I wish we could get them. Cicada Extracts is really good.
Cicada's good.
Sunday's good. Apothecary has some really good SHO.
You actually helped launch their store.
Oh hell yeah! I was at their opening, yeah. Yep. And I'm friends with some of their extractors. Those guys, they're the ones that make the magic happen. Yep. We have another company that we sell right now called it's called Lost Roots Hash, but they also go by Smith Valley Processing, and they have some pretty decent stuff. I mean, it's a little darker than what you'd normally be used to, but it's really good. I got lucky enough to try some of it before all this happened. And
I know people rave about that blonde shit, but I really don't, when I make my own, very rarely do I ever harvest it so early that it stays blonde like that. And it's like, what sesquiterpenes am I missing by not letting it finish? And I tend to prefer the darker stuff. I know it gets hated on a lot, but I personally prefer it, especially for making my own.
If it's like kind of a tannish color, to me that's fine. Now, if it comes out just like dark brown, that just tells me you probably used something that was a little older, or maybe it wasn't stored correctly, but it's still good. And I'll argue that with anybody. I myself, I prefer rosin over anything. Another good one I wish we could have got was Divine Collection. They have some really good stuff too. But yes, if you wanna come by the Yellow House in Durant or something of that sort, we'll definitely talk about Icy Milks, because I've seen your guys' product and everything, and it's amazing.
And we'll be at, I don't know if you'll be there, but I'll be at the 710 event over at Bubba's Brew House in just outside of Durant.
I forgot about that.
On Saturday. If anyone wants to come out, get high and have some awesome edibles.
Are you guys going to the Turk Float?
What's that?
The Turk Float that Apothecary is doing?
I think so.
In Tahlequah?
That's in August, I think. Mm-hmm. And then also, for those of you that don't know, let me throw this up on the screen here. If you guys are in Texas, especially if you're in Dallas or within commutable distance to Dallas, sorry guys, normally I can mute my mic, but my guest is physically with me, so we're stuck. I will be at the I'll be at that one too, but the Dallas on July 9th at 1 o'clock, I will be speaking on aquaponic cannabis and how aquaponics can help your hemp and or cannabis farm. I'm one of, if you want to see one of the only legal grows in all of Texas, we also have a video tour of one of the 3 only legal THC facilities in all of Texas that we had the pleasure of touring. So you can check that out over on my YouTube channel. But I will be, sorry, I will be speaking here again in Dallas at 1 o'clock. I'll also be speaking in Oklahoma City. I'll be in Houston, be in Albuquerque, and then I haven't decided on the Detroit or Richmond yet, but I will be at all 4 of these shows. So if you want to talk, hang out and talk to me. I don't know which date I'll be on these other ones, but in Dallas, I'll definitely be there on July 9th. Normally, I'm also on the Cultivation panel, but because we had previous obligations on the 10th, I was not able to stay for that on the 10th in Dallas. So unfortunately, we will get to that next time.
So that being said, with Texas, how does that work? I mean, I know they have. Is it set up basically to where if you're like a terminal patient or something, you can?
I have no idea on that. I know that most of the patients that the company that I had the pleasure of touring were dealing with mostly seizure patients or cancer patients or people that had pretty bad diagnoses that were not responding to traditional treatments. I know that they're slowly expanding it down there, but most of it's hemp or Delta 8 or, one of the loophole cannabinoids.
You can do a lot with Delta 8. People don't realize that. I mean,
but I think the Delta 8 is going to get regulated out of existence before the end of the year if I was betting that. Same thing with Delta 10. They're a half step away. I mean,
I've seen a little bit about Delta 10, but I haven't really read up on it a whole lot.
It's THC linked, so that.
No, I haven't, but I've thought about it. I mean, we sell gummies that are just Delta 8, and then we sell some that are Delta 8 and THC. So
she asked if he had tried Delta 8 anything since he had gotten sick. Someone asked if I was at CannaCon. I was not at CannaCon. I was actually out of town, not in Oklahoma that week, or whenever the heck that event was. I was in a different state. So I will also be at the High Times Cup in Oklahoma up in Tulsa on July 24th and 25th. I will be at the High Times Cup if you want to come up and hang out. I will be in Tulsa then if you guys want to come say hi as well.
I hope that goes better than I heard it went last year.
Yeah, well, thankfully I didn't. I'm going up to help somebody and buy a booth this time. So it'll be good. But yeah, definitely come up and say hi. We'll be there. I'll be hanging out, talking about aquaponics and talking about lighting with Spectrum King. So we'll be up there. They're one of the sponsors of the cup, so it'll be fun.
Hell yeah.
Good chance to get some cool interviews and a whole bunch of fun stuff. So. It'll be a lot of fun. So, and again, if you're hanging out, got nothing to do, and you're in Oklahoma on 7/10, especially if you're in Southern Oklahoma. He has not joined us yet. We're still hoping said he'd be on at 9:30, but I don't know what time zone he's currently in. So, I don't know exactly when he'll be joining us, but he will be joining us at some point. No, we have not been on Facebook Live this year, unfortunately. Eventually, frankly, I'm about to move to a much better house. Once I get moved, I actually have room for a whole office and setting up a dedicated space for this type of content generation. And we'll go back to a lot more heavy stuff. I have a lot of content kind of queued up for once I get into my new space here. So there's a bunch of stuff also that I've recorded that I need to edit down and get up. So we have a ton of content. We just did a big presentation on nutrients for the Aquaponic Association to help dispel a bunch of bullshit that's causing people to fail testing for causing people to fail for testing for heavy metals. So I did a whole presentation for the Aquaponics Association to help give people the correct options to choose from so that they don't run into that same problem, as well as cite what we were able to figure out was the source of heavy metal contamination in the systems that we have identified that problem with. So, the best way to stamp out misinformation is to put out good information. Again, that's part of what else we do. But we may or may not stream from that High Times Cup. We'll see. We'll see if they let us. We'll try and do something. We'll certainly do a short stream and have some other cool shenanigans going on up there that we'll get going on. Also, be sure to check out the second annual virtual Aquaponic Cannabis Conference, November 13th and 14th. We have an incredible list of speakers. I actually just got 2 more speakers on, and we're actually working on filling out an actual additional day of speakers because of the response that we've had and the high level of really interesting talks that people, when I reached out to them, wanted to give. So we have a genomics analysis of soil microbiology and terrestrial and aquatic microbiome. We have some super cool stuff on fungi, both terrestrial and aquatic. We have some awesome cannabis experts that I think most of you have not heard from that are able to speak at a similar level of knowledge to many people that you have, but have been doing their own separate line of research on KNF. We have the only aquaponic cannabis producer in all of Bangladesh, commercially, will be speaking with us. We have a gentleman from South Africa who will be speaking there. We have all different types of aquaponic cannabis farmers from all over the world. So not just the US, not just Canada, but across the planet. So as well as scientists that are speaking about individual topics relevant. So be a really, really cool conference this year. I am super excited, especially after looking at the list of some of the talks that I get to sit here and watch. I am just super excited. I can't begin to tell you. So you guys know I love brain food. So, I can never get enough. That's why, we always love having a lot of the different cool guests we have on the show. Anyways, I guess what else would you like to tell us about kind of the Oklahoma scene? Is there anything else, I guess, demographically or opinion-wise? How has it changed over the legalization years? And then I don't know, you kind of worked everything from cultivation to retail. What do you have any general observations on the space?
I think that over the last few years, it's definitely gotten better as far as I think a lot of people just jumped into this assuming that, well, hey, it's weed, it's going to be easy. And I think that's kind of died down a lot. You still got people that think that just because they smoke weed that they can work in this industry. That's not really the case.
Or, hey, I've grown 4 tents before. I can grow 5 acres. Yeah.
And I think people are finally starting to get more educated on the subject of, okay, well, this isn't like what we were doing, 5, 10 years ago. We're not just showing up in somebody's living room, buying whatever they have in a bag and going on our way. We're actually being able to find what people need, what people like, and kind of being able to key in more on that than we are just, well, here's your supply, go on your way. And I mean, I personally I've even worked for some people that had that exact same attitude. Well, if they're stoners, they're not going to care. That's not, to me, that's not how you should be going into a business. Your main goal, especially with something medical, should be it should be for the patient. You shouldn't be wanting to screw people over. And I've seen a lot of that, and I've seen a lot of that undo itself. Most of those people that started out in this industry 2 years ago, they're not still in business.
Yeah, 70% of the people that start a business here in the beginning of legalization fail because they have either ridiculous expectations or they have no clue what to do when it comes to actually just growing plants. Like, they don't know pest management, they don't know air movement, they don't know climate control, they don't know nutrient management, they don't know workflow, they don't know how to optimize stuff for cost savings. And you always have that burnout the first 2 years where you have this big churn and you're kind of hitting that end of it. But in Oklahoma, it almost seems artificially elongated because the amount of new players jumping into the market.
One thing I've noticed too, aside from people that have been doing this for 30 years on the lowdown, most of the people that get into this, they're just rich people looking to get richer.
Yep.
Like, they're not really interested in in learning anything. They just want to make money. And that's cool. I mean, make your money, but at what extent? You know, if you're not growing something that is good enough to be deemed medicine, why are you in a medical, you know?
We were to grow and we were doing everything like organically. I forgot. I thought there was a hose that we forgot to turn off. I get up at 2:30 in the morning and go out and try to shut the hose off, and I catch one of the owners in the room spraying some crazy shit that I'm not going to get into or where it was, but I showed up at a weird hour and caught them basically more or less with their pants down, and I was like, oh, well, that explains why all my beneficial insects are dying for no fucking reason. At least I figured that out. But you're kind of just burning money, right? Like, when you have people that go behind your back and you're spending their money on beneficial insects and sprays, and they're immediately annihilating all of them hours later after you release them with something that's going to kill all of them. It's like, you could just pay me that money and not burn it, right? I mean, I'll do something more useful with it, right?
Yeah, man.
But that's the kind of stuff that you have.
That's the thing I've found too, is that even people that have no clue what they're doing, because they're in that position of ownership or, you know, power in their mind, they still know more. And they won't listen to reason, they won't listen to logic. Nope. Like, it makes no sense.
The other thing that kills grows, just since we're talking about like ways that new grows die, because this is kind of almost a great conversation. One, too many chiefs, too many cooks in the kitchen, too many people trying to make decisions. Another one is,
we face that.
Hiring a consultant, having them give you an equipment list to order, and then going back and trying to find something cheaper for each one of those things. That is the quickest way to make your grow fail. I have had people do that and order completely different items that would not remotely work for the application, and then have to tell them they have to send something that costs $6,000 to $12,000 back. They don't want to hear that, right? Especially if it took a special truck shipment to get there.
Cheap doesn't always mean it'll work.
Yeah, and then so like, if you go behind your consultant's back and then want to just start nickel and diming and changing every last thing, if you can find one or two things, that's fine. You know what? Whatever. That's cool. But if you try to completely change a whole grow, and this has happened a couple of times, I've seen, and anyone that's done a consultancy in cannabis knows exactly what I'm talking about. Especially if you ever spec lights for anybody. You know, you have this stuff happen all the time, where you can spec out something that it took you 2 weeks to spec everything to an exact way to make sure everything would work right and be remotely connected to the Wi-Fi and be able to report back, so that not only can the owner sleep at night, but I, as someone who's responsible as a consultant to ensure that my name is kept good, can see that everything is going on from my phone at any given time. I try to get people on the remote systems, because if someone starts panicking, I can immediately plug into their phone, their system from wherever I am, and see what the hell's going on. You know, that helps me help them, right? So if I can't do that, you're hamstringing me. You're helping, you know, you're kind of stopping me from helping you, right? So this is the type of stuff that you need to think about. But I've had a couple of times where people had a really good situation and had just complete, like, or maybe I happen to have a good friendship with someone and they happen to be changing models or something. I can get them a crazy deal on lighting or something else, and I negotiate something, and then they'll turn around, something shows up 2 days later. Like, I've had that happen to me too, where, you know, it was literally cheaper than what they ordered for better equipment, and, you know, oh well. So this is the type of stuff that just makes you want to pull your hair out when you're trying to help people succeed. And this is the type of stuff that happens constantly in newer states. You have to, you know, have a little faith in the people that you're hiring, especially if they've, you know, helped you, you know, succeed in the past. And it's definitely something that can get frustrating.
See, that's what a lot of people that,
or people post something online, right? I want to second guess the person, especially when it comes to diagnosis of weirder problems with plants. If you've seen something, a dozen or more times, and someone posts it online, you got 6 people that don't know what they're looking at, telling you something different, and they want to, in the 4 or 5 days it took for us to finish arguing and to purchase and start applying whatever the proper solution is, you could lose the grow depending on what it is that's wrong. And I've seen that happen too, where we had whitefly or something else in the room, and it was like, hey, we need to act now. You got to get this shit ordered now. Like, we don't have time to wait 48 hours. You need to do it today, or we're fucked. And they wait too long, right? I've seen that happen too. So there's a lot of stuff where like, just people, or on the flip side, people don't understand the severity. The first year I was in Oklahoma, that's probably a great example. Septoria everywhere, and we're starting to see it again this year. We're just starting to hit the heat now. It was right in July last year, in 2019, where July and August, the outbreak got real, and we're hitting that time right now. And I've already seen 4 separate farms post on Oklahoma cannabis growers, or whatever the group is, that has pretty obvious septoria. So, it can definitely cause you problems. We're also seeing, just as a side note, I'm starting to see cucumber beetles become a serious issue in Oklahoma. I've gone to 2 separate grows now and identified them as an issue. So definitely keep an eye out if you are not familiar with cucumber beetle damage on cannabis. Familiarize yourself with it and look for it if you're in Oklahoma. They also can vector almost as many different diseases as whitefly or leafhoppers. So be very much on the lookout for secondary fungal infections or viral infections as a result from their attack, especially if it's been heavily preyed upon, because they can really fuck up your plants fast. We've got a grower that I'm working with that has had that problem where he didn't quite recognize the severity of the issue because he only saw a couple of them, and it rained for 3 or 4 days, and when he came back out there, his plants were wrecked. At least in that area where they had initially, begun to infest. So making sure that you get out there and set your cucumber beetle traps out now, and make sure that you're planning on how you're going to attempt to handle them. Aureus are an option as well. Assassin bugs, which you can also get fairly cheap from Arbico, you can release in your grow as another, large-bodied arthropod that's going to get in there and actually tangle with them. Those are probably your best 2 options.
Yeah, man, I've even had to tell some of my former employers that, you're not just paying me to do the work. You're paying me for the experience and the knowledge that I have on the subject. Because, truthfully, if you could do it yourself, you'd be doing it. And that's, in this industry, I feel like a lot of people are underpaid for what they know.
Oh, yeah.
I get it. It's a new industry. It's going to be that way, at least for a while. But you just have to, it's like you just have to trust the people that you hire. If you can't trust the people to do the job you hired them to do, there was no point in you bringing them in. And I know you've seen that, and I've seen it. And I feel like there's probably a lot of people in this industry that are facing that same issue.
Yep.
And, I see a lot of people, and I hate it. It's almost laughable because do you know how many master growers walk into our shop with their weed? And it's just like, man, the fact that you call yourself a master grower tells me everything I need to know.
Well, here's a question, because you've seen my shit grow and how fast it grows when it's dialed in. Like, have you seen any plants? And I don't mean this to toot my own horn, and you can cut me down in front of my audience right now. But have you seen plants ever grow as fast as that?
No, not in person. No, not the way that it was. And I got to see how things were with him, and I also got to stick around and see how things were after he left. And it was a tremendous difference. We're talking roots a foot, 2 foot long, and then no roots at all. And he knows it's true. I showed him pictures. Like, it just, knowledge is everything. And the problem that we all ran into at that particular place was they thought they knew more.
Well, they have the issue that we talked about in the beginning of too many chiefs, too many cooks
That
in the
was
kitchen.
definitely an issue.
And that's what it comes down to is like you have to have one farm manager who's in charge of the cultivation. And then you can have a different person who's in charge of processing, and you can have an owner that kind of oversees everything. But if you have more involvement than that, especially if they're trying to micromanage it, it just causes chaos. And then having everything structured where everyone knows what their roles and SOPs are, that makes for a well-oiled machine. And then also sitting down and having a beginning of the day meeting and end of the day meeting to make sure that you know anything that you weren't aware of as a team, not as an individual, as a team.
Communication.
And we used to do that every single day when I was there. We started the day off with a group meeting. We ended the day with a group meeting. What the hell happened today? And that's it. And a minor amount of communication makes so many things go smoothly and solves a million problems a year. I cannot, like, just even having a once or twice a day meeting solves so many problems before they turn into big problems.
That's the main issue I've run into in this industry. Is there's been no communication whatsoever. Every grow job I've had, it's been the same thing. No communication, and same issue. Too many chiefs, not enough Indians doing what the chiefs are saying. And usually, when I've run into that scenario, is the bigger problem is not so much the workers, it's the chiefs. They can't decide what they want to do and come to one agreement. Yep. One says this, the other says this, one says this. You don't know what to do.
Yep. And that's just on that note, though, that's something else I've seen commonly. People will put one person in charge of one area. That makes no fucking sense ever in agriculture, ever, except for like a nursery where one person's taking clones that's highly experienced. That'd be the one time I would say that that's okay. Everything else, no, because, or maybe pest control application, only people who have been trained up on it, because obviously legal reasons and another shit. But you gotta have your certification to get too far down that rabbit hole. But the other thing comes down to is that everyone has to just attack the room as a team, right? And then you say, okay, today we're gonna do this room, and then at lunch we're gonna do this, and maybe change clothes, put on our new smocks, and then go into the second room, and just stick it to 1 to 2 areas per day. This way you don't transfer bugs and all the rest. Pest control becomes easier and all the rest, or ideally 1, but if you have to, 2 areas per day, and stick to that. And then, but having everyone in different areas makes no sense at all. Nothing ever gets done because you don't have enough people to ever finish accomplishing anything. You have to have the whole team work together, bang it out, move on. It's far faster, far easier, and things get done more thoroughly. Plus, if you do have run into a problem, you can just attack it and blow it out of the way. So, anyways, we're kind of rambling about farm management, but hopefully it's interesting to y'all.
It's just a common problem around here with every person that I've seen or talked to or worked for. It's been the same issue, and since I've been in retail, though, there's not as many issues. I definitely have to say that retail is probably my favorite side of it. The only part about retail that I'm really not too fond of is like having to deal with people that I guess they feel like they know more. And I'm not saying that they don't know anything, but a lot of them are still, a lot of them probably didn't start smoking until a year ago. And that just, you can always tell when somebody doesn't know what they're talking about. It bugs me. It's a big pet peeve. I don't think anybody I don't think anybody could ever know everything, but knowing a little is better than knowing nothing. But the people that are like, oh, well, I know everything there is. You just told me you don't know anything. Because the fact that you think you know everything tells me I should probably just stay away from you. They're definitely rookies, a lot of them. That's not even a lie. I mean, you've got a lot of people out here that, like I said, there's some people out here that have been doing this for 20, 30 years. 2 years. So, I mean, they're getting the hang of it. And that's something I've said since the very beginning. They'll get there. It's just going to take a while, and it's going to take trial and error. And for some of these people, it's going to take completely fucking everything up the first time or the first 2 times before they actually get it right. And a lot of it is because they won't listen to anybody else. That's a very common thing. I mean, very, very common. But, as far as handle the heat in Oklahoma growing outdoors.
So in as far as the cultivars outdoors, the biggest thing is finding cultivars that are equatorial, to be honest with you. The best cultivars I've found, although they're not completely equatorial, have been Durban Poison, Malawi, Swazi crosses. I hopefully this year, once we get moved, I'll be able to pop some of my Zim stuff and try to get some clones outdoors before the end of the grow season here, and we'll see how they do. But I would imagine that they're going to do perfectly fine because, frankly, temperature and humidity-wise, it's almost identical to Oklahoma. Zimbabwe is not too humid, but it's not dry. And that's kind of a good way to describe where we are in Oklahoma. It's not humid all the time, but it certainly gets that way sometimes, but that's not normal. Most of the time, I would say it's on the drier side of humid, but still present, I guess.
As far as the comment about the bud tenders, I'll definitely agree with that.
But watch you read it.
It says, think it's possible some of these people have been told everything under the moon by bud tenders and don't want to hear it. I'll agree with that. There's some bud tenders that will literally just pull things out of thin air and talk out of their ass because they know better, just to make a sale. I can definitely agree with that. But then you have people like me and the people I work with. We actually try. We actually really try to help benefit people and help teach people what it is they need, what it is they're looking for. I mean, but you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can give you all the information under the sun, show you sources to back up all my claims, and at the end of the day, you're going to do what you want to do. You're going to believe what you want to believe, and that, to me, I mean, that's not my problem, honestly. I mean, if I do what I'm supposed to do and you still go on with what you believe, that's on you. I can only go so far, and I'm only willing to go so far. You know, I'm not going to argue with somebody, but I do research. I listen to people like Steve or, other people that I know that have been doing this for hell longer than I've been alive, and I listen. Do I think that everything that they say is completely 100% true? No. If you're not willing to do your own research based off of what somebody else said, then you really don't know anything. And you're never going to. You're just going to be repeating information over and over. You got to be able to take in information and make your own opinion, form your own thoughts on it. You shouldn't just completely basically copy paste what somebody else says. I don't like that.
Yeah, and I want to just support what he's saying too. That's kind of the point of this show. That's why we bring on so many different people on. That's why sometimes some of our guests directly contradict what each other say. That's the whole point, is that what works in your grow might not work for everybody's grow. And that's the same thing with aquaponics. If I'm doing a nursery to provide for 25 or 150 acres, I'm only going to build a 20 or 30,000 square foot greenhouse just to provide, a small flowering space for maybe seed breeding and line production, as well as clone production to feed that acreage, right? And that type of thing is the way of the future, and thinking about how you can utilize the best thing for the right scenario. So that the same type of thing when we're talking about like our first topic on the vaccine and stuff like that, look at your personal health situation and see if that leads to a situation that might lead to something like he has dealt with. The same thing with your grow, right? Because especially with different soil types and things like that, you can have radically different experiences with popping in and out here. Radically different experiences with different soil types and different inoculants based on the soil density. If you're in a super compact clay, it might not work the same as an aerated organic forest soil, right? So think about that type of stuff, and that same type of diversity too. You got to make your own decisions for it, and that's the same. That's why we try to bring on so many different types of guests that are all living soil or aquaponic people on the show, is to kind of give you guys kind of a toolbox. That's kind of how I always think of this show, is that I want to give you guys a toolbox. That's what I like to have on people on the show for myself, as well as I want to have this access of resources to all these cool people that I would love to pick their brains on, and learn about all the different cool stuff that they know. That's why a lot of times we'll have very specific topics in mind when we bring certain guests on, is because we're trying to educate something that maybe you guys haven't heard of or been exposed to, or maybe I haven't heard of or been exposed to. Most of the time, I kind of know what these guys are going to talk about, or are able to talk about, or their background, but sometimes I don't, and it's really kind of cool to see the different diversity that we have on the show.
And I mean, in my personal experience, dude, you could ask 3 people the same question about what they think is the proper way to do growing, or do this or do that, and you're going to get 3 totally different answers, because, like you said, not everything works for everybody. And
that's the difference between us and some of the other stuff out there. It's like, oh, well, if you don't do it this way, well, then it's wrong. You don't hear us say that often, without outside of a few things that we think are actually going to either A, kill your fish, B, kill your plants, or C, kill you. If it doesn't do one of those 3 things, we might say, hey, that's kind of silly, but we're not going to be like, oh, we'll never do that, right? Like, it's not something that you don't really hear from us that often on this show. So again, I really take issue with some of the other people out there that, and we've talked about them previously on the show, especially when Coot's on, about certain people that like to make certain proclamations and ridiculous yarn to thumbtack connections between things, and try to make definitive things. And at the end of the day, soil microbiology and plant microbiology simply doesn't follow those types of rules, nor does it give a shit about them. So you kind of have to work with nature and what nature provides, and adapt your local grow conditions to a variety of different things, especially when it comes to the natural farming inputs. I mean, what is easy to create in one area, like how many times have we talked about Jacobah on this show? I can't even get a seed culture. Okay, it's something I am desperately trying to get a hold of right now. I thought I got a hold of one, and then it came and it didn't really I managed to get one, but it didn't culture right, so I got to get a new one. I guess it died in shipping. So it's something that I'm dying to do some research on, especially once I move and have my own personal grow again, because it's an aquatic loving fungi that's plant beneficial, that's not a myco, or isn't documented at least in any type of serious way. So it's super interesting to me, because it's like potentially an aquatic micro inoculant for aquaponics. So definitely a rabbit hole that I'm super excited to get down into as soon as we get moved and more set up with a more permanent aquaponic facility of my own, to tinker with kind of outside of prying eyes.
the thing that I like about aquaponics is, like, it's just fascinating. I mean, there's so much that before working with you and hearing, there's a lot of shit that I didn't know anything about. Like, and I'll be honest, when I first got into the industry, I knew it was going to be work, but there's a lot more that goes into growing weed than I ever could have thought about. And
that and like seeing stuff ahead of time and like pre-planning, I think is the biggest thing, especially when it comes to pest control. I'm like, well, we know it's going to get more humid with this part of the year, or we know it's going to get hotter, or we know that the pests of X, Y, like Jamaica has butterfly season every May. Anyone that's grown in Jamaica knows exactly what I'm talking about. You have butterfly season in May, and they literally have a whole name for it. It's beautiful if you're a tourist. It's horrific if you're a grower, because you have this swarm of butterflies that lays eggs all over your plants. It's horrific. But they go out there and they pay the kids a couple cents a day to run around and basically just run up and down the rows and chase the butterflies off, just swinging the little stick and just running back and forth, and that's it, right? So like, there's solutions to this type of stuff. It's even organic, or like, hey, you got a bunch of kids that want to make an allowance. Cool, kid. Here's $1 for the day. Go run around all day. That's your job, is to run around. Like, that's pretty, it's not very hard to motivate the kids. Be like, you have to chase butterflies all day. That's your job. Like, how many kids are going to turn that down, right? So like, you got to work with the local ecosystem, regardless of what it is. And that's something else too that you see a lot in Jamaica. You see a lot of people's kids involved in grows. You don't see a lot of pictures of it for obvious reasons, but they certainly are very. I mean, you see whole villages where everyone has and there's a village that I'm very, very fond of on the south side of the island. I have a lot of love for those people down there. It's a place that I always stop every time I'm down there and pick up some weed. And I always make sure I have a couple of extra bucks just to give out to the kiddos. I don't buy anything from them, but I always give them cash because I feel bad for them. But there's always little kids that, 8, 9, 10 years old, steal some seeds, go off, start their own lines. And, when they hit 18, they have some nice lines going, but that happens a lot in a lot of parts of the world. And I think a lot of people don't realize how this is such an economic crop for so many parts of the world, and how whole regions of the world rely on it as an income. You see this in Lebanon, you see this in Morocco, you see this in Jamaica, you see this all over the world. And I really wonder how those economies are going to change with global legalization. It really kind of worries me a little bit. I'm sure same thing with the Himalayas too, what's going to happen up there with their economy when the rest of the world can also grow. It's going to fuck up their economy pretty hard. So that, or develop terroirs and develop specific export things like you're starting to see in California, where they're trying to brand around the region and kind of make that something that they can actually benefit from long term. So it's kind of this cool crossroads in the history of cannabis's future, especially when it comes to the true producers that have been maintaining the secret knowledge for so long.
which cannabis was treated the same as the wine. Yeah. And then you don't see them. Putting a limit on how much alcohol you can buy. So yeah, I guess I could go with that.
All right. So, anybody have any other questions about Oklahoma or the Oklahoma cannabis industry?
The only other thing I would like to say about Oklahoma is I think we're eventually going to get there, but it's just going to take time, just like anything else. I mean, you got to crawl before you can walk. And a lot of people that I've seen, instead of crawling, they want to take off running before they know how to walk. And it's just not going to work out. You got to be able to listen to reason. You got to be able to listen to logic.
So there's I did want to mention, so there's a thing in chat here. So a gentleman mentioned yucca powder probably also help plants with the heat. It says, I think it kills fish. Yes. So Yucca absolutely is good for your plants if you're in soil. You can use super labs or blue labs um, that you can use for benefiting the plant growth acceleration in the same kind of way that you would for that, as well as that healing properties that you kind of get from that are definitely the things that you want to benefit from. But yucca and other saponin heavy containing plants will very much fuck up your grow, especially in regards to aquaponics, because it kills all of your fish. If you're doing soil, it's perfectly fine. Just don't use them with fish because it will kill your fish at a very, very low dose. On the flip side, if the apocalypse happens and you can break into a grow store, steal a whole bunch of saponins so that you can dose the local river and have enough dried fish for the whole winter. But I didn't tell you that.
It's the question about the 25%.
I have a question. All these guys are moving. They're allowed to have 25% of the business until they're a resident. Yeah, so the legal rules in Oklahoma are an Oklahoma resident has to own 75% of the license. 25% can be owned by a non-in-state resident after 2 years. So what most of the farms do is they have some kind of license agreement where they, on paper own 25%, but, realistically own whatever they feel they should own. And then they generally work out something long-term after those first 2 years. They have a contract to shift ownership over to them. And then the original owner either cashes out or maintains a certain percentage of ownership for long-term financial gain. So
what can we do to help normalize cannabis more quickly?
Education.
Teach your kids. That's the future right there. And if they're not taught that it's a drug or if they're not taught that stigma, it's going to go away. The only reason there's still a stigma today is because I know I've always been taught marijuana was a gateway drug. You don't do that. It's illegal. Well, we can get rid of that. And that starts now. Teach yourself, teach the people, teach the kids, teach them that it's not something that they should do at this point, but teach them that it's not bad. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, not only that, but how many people you've ever heard gets I dabbed out and beat the shit out of somebody like that? I don't think I've ever heard that statement. But I've heard it a plenty. Oh man, I got so drunk I fought this dude. That I've heard a bunch, right? So I think at the end of the day, I think we could all feel better if we found out our kid was doing one or the other. We'd prefer it's weed. That's not that we're encouraging children in any way.
No, definitely not.
You should be 21 or older.
I would definitely like.
If you're not 21 or older, you shouldn't be listening to this show because you're not allowed.
I'd definitely like for my daughter to be of legal age, but at the same time, there are far worse things that she could be doing the same shit I was doing at 13, 14 years old. So pot would be a step up from that. So
same thing for me, man. It's funny because I have a niece who's starting to get to the same age as it was anyways, to think about what she's doing at her age versus what I was doing at my age. I'm glad she's not on the same path that I was. Let's put it that way, for my own ability to sleep at night.
Exactly. And that you're right. It says that the younger generation seems more accepting. And I think that's because so many states throughout the United States and other countries have accepted it as being legal, as being medicine. And I think that right there has helped. I think that has definitely helped with them being more accepting. And the fact that, not to sound this way, but celebrities, people that are in the news, people in the media, they do it. And that's who kids go at. That's who kids idolize more than anything. And if they're doing it, they think, why can't I do it? But that also has a bad effect too, because a lot of those people are doing other drugs, and that's why you see younger people getting into meth and crack and cocaine and shit. And we've all probably dabbled in some shit, but it starts with education. It starts with teaching them. And, my daughter knows what marijuana is. She knows she's not allowed to touch it. She knows she's not allowed to really be around it, but she can tell you that's medicine. And she knows where I work. She thinks that I work at a medical store. That's what I tell her. So, I mean, you just gotta educate them, man, and it all goes from there.
No, you're fine. No worries. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun to talk to someone else that I've worked with in the industry, and then also, hey, if he wants to tell me that I'm not going to do anything, I'm more than welcome to do so. But super fun to have you on. What are some of, you've had a chance to see a couple of different grows and kind of see some of the end thing. What is some of the stuff you kind of see sneaking through? Maybe occasionally seeds or bugs or what's some of the stuff that you are seeing maybe on the ugly side? Again, don't mention anybody. I'm not trying to shit on anybody.
Probably the worst thing I've seen is like mold or powdery mildew, some bugs. But then I'm just seeing like the worst thing that bugs me more than anything is like disorganization. When you have a grow that's featuring 3,000 plus plants or so, and you've got this plant mixed in with this plant, with this plant, with this plant, but then you've got more of this plant over here by that drives me nuts. Not ever being able to find anything, and you can't treat every strain, every plant exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but you're trying to weed out the weak ones, right? You're trying to get the stuff that doesn't need to be babied anymore. I think a lot of people don't understand that, like one of the first things I do if someone gives me control of a grow, on average, I purge 15 to 30% of the moms. Because usually almost always I can find stuff that's infected with stuff that's been there for a long time. So either mosaic virus, powdery mildew, or something else that's like very clearly gone full systemic in the plant that they just don't even recognize. That's a fairly common problem that I see, and I immediately want to go in and start purging moms, and they're like freaking out because they just spent on whatever, they blew some guy behind a booth to get Mac 1 before it was available or whatever the fuck. I don't care, but like that's what the story was behind how they got those seeds. So they have this bizarre emotional attachment that borderlines on cult obsession with that one strain, and they got to just dump it because it's the one strain in their whole room that keeps being the vector of their powdery mildew or whatever the fuck. So that's one of the hardest things as well when it comes in as a consultant, is just like, look, if a strain hates your grow conditions, fuck it. Like, you can try and sit here, you can dump a ton of money in IPM, you can totally grow that strain. But if it hates your grow conditions and it's going to be pouty because of your temperature, humidity, because you're growing in soil and not aquaponics, because you're growing in aquaponics and not soil, because you're growing in hydroponics and not the other two, because of, I don't know, because it's Sunday. Certain strains just are pouty little bitches. Everyone that's done pheno hunting knows this. So if you find something that expresses well in testing, it doesn't always mean that it's the perfect thing when you try and convert it into your indoor grow come winter. So you gotta, play with what you get. You gotta deal with the hand you're dealt, and you gotta maximize upon the genetics that you have in-house in your library, and that will produce things at a rate that makes sense to you. So this is the type of stuff you have to min-max when you're getting into that type of stuff, and the type of metrics that you need to be thinking about. And then again, do I want to spend a bunch of money in IPM, or do I want to trash that one strain, replace it with 2 or 3 more that aren't going to be pouty little bitches, and profit off of that? And I think that's something that a lot of people that are newer in the industry have a hard time just trashing stuff that hates their grow environment. They have, again, an emotional attachment to it that clouds their judgment when it comes to trashing stuff that doesn't belong.
Yeah, but it's better to trash the stuff that doesn't belong than to end up having to throw the whole damn room away because you've spread a virus or bugs or something of that nature. And I've seen that happen too. And eventually they did listen to reason, and they ended up getting rid of over 100 plants because of it. But it's just like anything else. You got to be willing to listen to people that might know more than you do. And if you're not willing to listen or be wrong, then you're not going to make it far in anything. Me personally, I don't mind being proved wrong at all, because if you can prove me wrong, that just means I got more that I can learn about. And
we were talking about that before the show. We were like, look, if the best thing that happens is someone diagnoses you with whatever the fuck is wrong, and you find a solution, and it ends up being, on the 0.0001% chance somehow not related to that, great. You know what? I'd rather have that me look like a fucking retard or idiot or whatever the current appropriate socially acceptable term is, rather than you suffer, right? At the end of the day. But there's a lot of evidence aiming at exactly the issue that you have, and it's backed up by quite a few people that have a lot of paperwork that we don't, and letters in front of their name that we don't. So, and hopefully, I guess I misunderstood and thought he was on Pacific. So if that's the case, then I got to message him in a minute. But anyways, I guess he's on Pacific currently. Sorry, I'm trying to juggle a bunch of messages and moderate entirely too much social media on this topic tonight. More than I originally thought, or I would have had an additional moderator help me. I'll just be honest with you. So, yeah. But is there anything else maybe you want to mention in regards to the first topic on the vaccine and cannabis and that whole topic in general? What advice would you have for people that are like, man, I don't know if I should get this, but, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. If you don't want to answer that question,
if you don't feel comfortable, don't do it. If you're not 100% sure that that's what you want to do, don't do it. And again, I'm not against vaccines. I'm vaccinated. My kid's vaccinated. My wife is vaccinated. Everybody, pretty much everybody I know is vaccinated. So it's not like I'm some anti-vaxxer. I'm just saying, do whatever feels right to you. If you're not comfortable with it, don't do it. Don't do it because somebody else tells you should. Now, obviously, if you're traveling, you're probably going to have to make some tough decisions or you're not going to travel. But other than that, if you're doing just fine in your life and everything seems to be okay, I personally wouldn't do it. If I could go back, I wouldn't have done it because it wasn't necessary for me. But,
And I wanted to bring that up because there was recently a 5-month study done by one of the CDC testing groups, or one of the groups working with the CDC. It hasn't been fully published yet and peer reviewed, but it's in the process of being peer reviewed right now. That over 50,000 patients, the only people that got infected were people that got the vaccine. None of the people that were previously infected had a reinfection. To date, there's less than 30 people that have been confirmed reinfected after having previously been infected. And all of them have been infected with radically different variants right around the exact same time. There has not been anyone document, as I heavily researched this for 2 hours before the show, to date, and if someone wants to publish this in the comments and prove me wrong, please do. No one documented that was infected and had more than 60 days after infection a secondary infection. I could not find any evidence of anyone that had been infected and then had that incubation period and the immune response and then a secondary strain infection. There's no documented evidence for that.
I got COVID in February. Well, actually January, because it ended right around the 1st of February. So from there until May, when I got my second shot, I felt perfectly fine. I didn't have any kind of side effects. I didn't have any, you know, I didn't feel like I was at risk of being reinfected. And to tell you the truth, I feel strongly that I feel strongly that I personally didn't have COVID until I got tested. And the reason I feel that way, I didn't have any symptoms of COVID. Nothing. And then I got.
You got diagnosed 2 days after we went to that event. It was that Thursday, and we were there on that Tuesday.
And I went, when I went to the doctor, I went for a sinus infection. It was the only thing I went for. And it was just because I couldn't breathe. Like, my nose was starting to, my nose was like starting to drain and everything. And I was getting real stuffy, and it was just like mucus coming out. I went to the doctor. I wasn't running fever. I still had taste and smell. I felt perfectly fine, other than my nose. And then, you know, the lady came in. She did the COVID test with me, and she was, even the nurse that I talked to before they gave me the test, she even said, I think you just have a sinus infection, truly. They came in, they stuck that deal up my nose, and after that, you know, it wasn't 30 minutes, I started feeling like shit. I started to get like feverish, and then I lost my taste and smell that night. Like, I wholeheartedly believe I didn't have COVID until I got tested. And I'm not usually one to buy into other people's conspiracy, but I had seen and heard that people were saying that they were getting infected by tests that were already, that had the virus on the tests. I don't know if that's true, but that's one of the things I thought was possible, because I didn't feel bad until after that. And when it hit me, it hit me hard. I mean, the first couple days anyway. After the first few days, I felt okay. It was just boring as fuck being in the house for 2 weeks. I mean, I guess there are worse things.
Yeah, I mean, you still are with us to have a podcast, so we're really grateful for that. Not everyone still with us. So for those of you that don't know, my mother died of COVID in December 13th of 2019. We didn't know it was COVID at the time, but she caught a horrific chest cold in the end of November, beginning of December. I'm not entirely sure when exactly on the timeline. But she had a horrific chest cold and was also had a cancer diagnosis and was overweight. But the cancer was not very far progressed. That was a very, just 2 weeks after diagnosis. But she passed away of a heart attack, basically from respiratory issues and what we now think was COVID, and one of the earliest waves. So I fully understand what people go through with this and the vaccine and everything else in terms of losing loved ones, me more than most people. Hey, there's the gentleman.
Yeah, her
Hey.
uncle died too.
Hey there, Kevin. How's it going?
Good. How are you? You guys hear me?
I'm doing well. I'm super glad to have you on the show. For those of you that don't know at home, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey there, Kevin McKernan here. Let me see if I can get my video started. I think I'm a little bit, I'm still catching up on the Zoom here, but I do a lot of work in medicinal genomics and on cannabis genetics and in the PCR field. So I've been paying very close attention to all of this COVID mess that's going on, because there's certainly a lot of abuse of that platform being put to play in this pandemic.
Yeah, so this is the gentleman I was telling you about who well, why don't you give him just a quick rundown, and then I would love to hear Kevin's thoughts on this because I'm just dying to hear this.
So I got my last COVID shot the first day of May. A couple of days later, I was smoking just like normal, and I basically thought I was going to have a heart attack, or that I was having a heart attack. And since then, every time that I've tried to smoke, I can't. Like my heart rate goes through the roof. Not like stroke level or anything, but my blood pressure is high. And since all of that, I've been to 2 doctors. I've been put on beta blockers and blood pressure medication. But before all this, my blood pressure was never high. Like that's something they've always commented on, is that I've always had great blood pressure. And then now, even with my own blood pressure monitor that I have at home, even now, still up until this week, my blood pressure's in like stage 1 hypertension. And
were any of the physicians aware of the myocarditis findings that have been going? I mean, May's kind of early on this. Maybe not all of them were up to speed on that, but the myocarditis incidences have been rising. They've been seeing more and more of this. This is a heart inflammation that occurs post second injection of the vaccine.
The cardiologist that I see, he did mention to me that he had seen this a couple of times. One of the times being with one of the nurses that actually works in his clinic. But he also did make the statement that every person he's seen has mostly been quite a bit older than me.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is while the virus tends to hit the elderly, the adverse events of the vaccine seem to be not as age discriminating. They even seem like they might be worse in the youth. And I don't understand that. But the one thing, a good physician to follow on this, I'm not a cardiologist, so I don't want to hand out any medical advice here. So I would point you toward some of the work from Peter McCullough, who's out of Baylor and Texas A&M, and he's been mentioning troponin levels should be checked if you've had any sign of heart issues post vaccination. They want to look for troponin levels to see if there's any sign of long-term inflammation on the heart, like myocarditis or even pericarditis, which is inflammation of the lining of the heart. Now, THC could be an aggravator of this because THC has been known to hit tachycardia. It can make your heart go faster. And so that, I would imagine, if you combine that with myocarditis, it could be probably quite painful. That's something I would keep an eye on this, because there are certainly cases of people with myocarditis, and it becomes chronic as opposed to acute, and it can really scar the heart. And you want to make sure they take it seriously and have a look at it. My only concern on this is this whole vaccine has become so politicized and factionalized that there seem to be people who are like, either you're in or out of this type of vaccine club. And that's unfortunately really damaging to medicine. And some physicians, maybe they're not totally aware of this or want to believe that the vaccines, in fact, do come with some risk. Now, these aren't traditional vaccines, so I don't think anyone should be feeling like they're getting any anti-vax guilt from these things. These are experimental, they're new, we've never done this before. They're messenger RNA vaccines, so no one should be feeling guilted out of shedding any type of questions or doubts on these vaccines. I think that's what you tend to get from a lot of people in the community, is they're like, oh, you're anti-science if you question this. And I think you should just power right through that stuff, because it's not anti-science. We're doing science live right now, unfortunately, on human subjects, and it's really unfortunate that no one really knows the answer to this thing. I don't know the answer to this thing. All I do know is I've seen respectable doctors who don't seem to be captured by the system bring up these concerns, and and they tend to get censored, and that scares the hell out of me. That we don't have a really good reporting system on this. If you ever bring up the VAERS database, all the vaccine advocates will just shit on it, saying that's a horrible database. There's too many flaws to it, but they don't have an alternative right now. So it's very difficult for people to make any statements that these things are totally safe, everyone take them, and then turn around and say the adverse report database we have sucks. And then that means you don't know that they're safe, right? We just don't have a good reporting system. And stories like yours, I think, are really important to get out there and to get to the physicians so we can get to the bottom of this. Information is what's going to solve this, not team A, team B kind of crap.
Absolutely. And we actually started the episode with a disclaimer and said, hey, if you're going to even attempt to use this episode to push your anti-vax bullshit, get the fuck up out of here. That is not the point of this episode. The point of this episode is to help people make informed decisions based on their own personal health experiences so that they can decide if they have certain sets of criteria that might put them at additional risk of certain vaccines. Now, I have not seen we've talked to 5 people that have similar conditions to Aaron, but he's talked to a couple. I've talked to 2 separate people firsthand. All of them had previously been infected with COVID and then gotten specifically the Moderna vaccine. So okay. With that being in mind, maybe
that's interesting. Yeah, the Moderna vaccine it has more RNA. It's a 100 microgram shot instead of 30. And so in theory, it may be producing more spike protein. And spike protein is that there's work now out of Japan where they look at the biodistribution of this thing. Traditional vaccines stay in your arm where you inject them. And what they're finding with the biodistribution studies out of Japan, I'll have to find a link for you these things because not all of the stuff is making it through the journals, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. But I usually look for a couple of physicians that can qualify whether the data that we're finding is in fact real. But Peter McCullough has backed some of this work as well. But the biodistribution data on this is showing that the vaccine and the spike protein gets expressed and travels. It doesn't stay in your arm. It gets to the spleen, it gets to the ovaries, the testes, and a small amount of this goes into the blood-brain barrier. They don't know if it's actually a meaningful amount. It's just detectable there, and it's not detectable for a long period of time. But this is new for us. Vaccines traditionally don't do this. I think the myocarditis risks we have to pay very close attention to. I, for one, did not take it because I have heart issues in our family as well. And I saw enough data on ivermectin and I saw enough data on the risk profile of this that I said, you know what, I've got enough vitamin D cooking in me. I know there's some benefits for cannabinoids on this from what I've read. I've read about Q-certain, I've read about HCQ. I just said, I think I'm comfortable prophylactically treating this. And if I get really sick, maybe I'll have to roll over and do ivermectin or something. But those don't seem to be having these risks to the heart. They're suppressed in the media. There's no doubt about that. They're generics. There's a different monetary incentive around those things. So I think they've been buried because the vaccines have a different financial reward going on with the patent estate. But the Moderna is interesting because that is a higher load. But I have to say, from what I've read about the myocarditis risks, it's not exclusive to any one of the vaccines. It seems like any one of the ones that produce spike proteins can have this effect. You might be unique in that you're seeing this intersect with cannabinoid use. There's not a lot of that being discussed because it's so stigmatized that I, for one, am kind of curious if there's a way to run a poll in the cannabis industry if there was lower COVID infection risk. If people who are heavy cannabis users or even light cannabis users, were they less susceptible to the virus? Because there's all this literature pouring out.
I can tell you firsthand, him and I, and actually his wife is sitting out of camera range. All 3 of us were at multiple cannabis events in Oklahoma, and there was no attributed COVID cases attributed to any of those. And this was back November, December, January, when it was supposed to be raging. And it either had completely gone through the area, or the fact that there was so much cannabinoids. And in fact, if you go back and look at the Thailand study, Thailand did a whole study of all the plants and the bio... that were beneficial against COVID. The number one thing was canflavin B, which is
or cannabicin B, was it canflavin or I saw one on cannabicin as well.
A or B, I don't remember which. I think it was B.
Yeah. That docked into, I think that was docking into like one of the proteases, right? It was some type of protease inhibitor.
Yes. It was stopping the replication.
Yeah.
You could explain it better than I could. I'm fucking childish compared to your knowledge. Feel free to tell me I'm an idiot.
Well, no. If I remember that one correct, that was really early. It was almost a year ago, and I was shocked at how that just went nowhere. Like, here's a thing that grows in the ground that might stop this, and it's just crickets across the board in the media about, well, wait a minute, this is like anyone could grow this. This could stop the pandemic, and that was actually a really interesting way to so the molecular, if I remember that correctly, there's a protease that actually takes the SARS proteins and clips it into pieces. So the SARS is really interesting in that it makes a really long peptide. And then afterwards is a protease that dices that thing up into smaller Lego pieces. And it's something that specifically inhibited that protease, which is a kind of a unique drug pathway that we're not seeing many other things tackle right now. But yeah, so I'm quite curious retrospectively if there's any way to sort out, was there a lower attack rate in the cannabis community because we all, this is a community that has a higher level of CBD. It's almost as if it's a community that probably isn't as vitamin D deficient either. There's a host of things that I think this community was probably hoping, safer for because of this. And if there's any way we can kind of sort that out through retrospective studies, that would be really fascinating.
Well, two questions just in follow up to that. One, why does mullein seem to stop progress of COVID in its tracks when you smoke it? Because I not only myself and my partner I live with, both of us, her and I both, smoked mullein as soon as we found out we were diagnosed with COVID, and immediately within 3 hours started improving our situation. That's what the Native Americans used against pneumonia. That's what a lot of traditional medicine has been used around the world. Why mullein is spread around the world, not only for its antibiotic topical properties, but it's smoked as an antibiotic. But you can use.
I don't know anything about this. You gotta send me some links. This is so fascinating. There's
a lot of documentation for its antibiotic use as a topical and as the buds, as a steeped a solution for making salves. There's not a lot of documented evidence for lungs, but we give out, anyone that's ever been around my orbit knows I give out it. It's the plant on the side of the road that always has those giant yellow stalks.
Holy shit, yeah, I've seen those.
And you can use it as toilet paper if you're camping. It makes wonderful toilet paper if you've never used it as toilet paper. It's great for wiping your ass.
Looks a little invasive for me, but I don't know. I'll take your word for it.
It's slightly invasive, but the reason why it exists in North America, it's originally a European herb, but it's heavily used as an antibiotic. And when the white people came out west, they would bring it with them as part of their medicine cabinet, and they would plant it along the trails that they would use. The Native Americans very quickly realized that it was antibiotic, and they would actually mix it with yarrow for their war paint, so that when they went to war and they got shot with an arrow or cut with an axe, they wouldn't get infected. They very much knew what was up with antibiotics in this plant. I had the luxury, if you guys are ever in Colorado, especially in Denver, this gentleman named Andrew, I can't remember his last name off the top of my head because it's a bit late in the day, but he runs the Denver Herbal Survival classes if you go on meetup.org.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The most knowledgeable survival person in all of Oklahoma. He trained under Brigitte Mars, the military, his Native American ancestry and plant knowledge, and then a separate survival school under, I can't remember the guy's name, but he has 4 completely different sets of training and survival training. And that man knows more than any other human being I've ever met.
You sent me down another 3-week rabbit hole. This is great.
I had the pleasure of training under him and then teaching him some of the high altitude mushrooms that I knew that he did not. And he allowed me to tag along on some of his classes. So I'm really good friends with him, and definitely a guy that I cannot recommend enough if you're in the Colorado area to take his classes. He's worth every dollar that you spend. He also brings fresh homemade kombucha and a bunch of other really awesome hippie foods with him every time he does classes. So
very cool. All right, I'm gonna have to get his name from you offline here just to make sure I don't miss out on that. I do to Colorado quite a bit. In fact, I'm going out there in August to see Slightly Stupid at Red Rocks. So
I'm super jealous of all my friends picking porcinis right now, for sure.
Yeah. So what's the active ingredient in that thing? Is there, have they,
We don't actually know the active ingredient, but I grow the plant in any garden I have. I have seeds and stuff like that. And then what you can do is you can take the buds. Let me put the picture back up here. You can take the buds, and what you do is how you utilize the plant is a bunch of different ways you can utilize this plant. So let me pull up a full plant picture here. Okay, so I'm going to pull this up. All right, so the bottom part of the plant, you're going to harvest the leaves from the bottom going up to the top. You're going to dry them and smoke them. That's going to be like your antibiotic, respiratory, sinus, anything in the mouth, sinuses, lungs. You smoke it like you would weed, it'll heal you if it's an antibiotic. It also helps reduce inflammation. If you have a secondary viral infection, it'll just help reduce the craziness going on, reduce the phlegm, while also being a bronchodilator and being a expectorant. So it helps kick everything out, helps dilate everything, and helps you breathe again. And you can actually use it for a mild, and this isn't medical advice, but I have had previously other people use it for, that I know, use it for treating mild asthma attacks as well, for dilating the lungs. So it works really well for that. You can also pick the buds off the top of this before they open. Like, so if you took them from here up and you put them into jars and you steep them in sunflower oil or coconut oil, you can extract the oil after 3 to 6 months and create a heavily antibiotic salve that is incredibly powerful. So definitely something to think about if you're growing in your garden. And then just something that has incredible healing properties. You can also make a pumice of it, mix it with some arnica, and it's good for just about any skin infection.
So your experience with this is you got you're PCR positive for COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2, right? And you said in a few days after smoking this stuff, all your symptoms subsided and it was gone.
Oh no! Mullen's totally unconnected to this. He's been suffering since then and has not changed.
Oh
no, I meant on your behalf. I'm assuming if you already had it, you didn't need to get vaccinated.
No. So yeah. Well, that's my feelings of it, especially with all the evidence that supports that you get the immune response. But with the Mullen, as soon as we started smoking it, immediately I could start to breathe better. And by 2 or 3 days later, my lungs were back to maybe scratchy, like I just walked through an attic or a basement, but not anything worse than that. You know what I mean?
So I'm curious on the other scenario with the tachycardia or the putative myocarditis. We shouldn't call it that because I don't know what it is. But does CBD give you a similar effect?
CBD hasn't affected me. Neither has CBG.
CBG, okay. And have you been taking that? Because sometimes I find maybe this is a personal anecdote, but I think I've read this elsewhere too, that ingestion through smoking is more prone to give you tachycardia than an edible with THC. And I don't know if that's true with CBD or CBG, but I would imagine most people tend to take those as an edible as opposed to smoking flower. But obviously where you guys are from, you can find CBG flower.
I tried doing edibles probably the first week that all this had been going on, and it did the same thing.
Do you know of other folks that are having the same experience? Because I've heard of people post-vaccination now where they get horribly hungover with just one drink.
Yeah, so we've had 5 people that we've found. I personally, him and then one of my investors on a separate cannabis company that I work with also is almost identical symptoms to him, except he can smoke joints, but he can't smoke concentrates at all anymore. If he smokes concentrates, he has almost identical symptoms to him. That's how I figured out what was wrong with him, because it was like, dude, I spoke to someone 40 hours ago who has the same symptoms as you. And then he's found a couple of other people that have almost identical symptoms to him.
The people that I know were just people that the doctors that I've talked to have diagnosed with a similar issue. So I don't personally know them, but I've heard, what their symptoms were, and it all starts with the vaccine. That's the one common factor between all, is that they may not even smoke cannabis, but the common factor in it is, yes, they started having heart problems after getting the vaccine.
There's a question in chat, Kevin, just to follow up with that exact thing. Is it possible that latent COVID side effects are, along with the introduction of the spike proteins from the vaccine in combination, could be the issue?
Well, what's really weird about this is there are all these really interesting papers on the SAB binding domain in the spike. So SAB stands for Staphylococcus enterotoxin. It's a super antigenic peptide that's normally found in staph. But there's a short sequence of this in the spike protein that they think is responsible for a lot of the cytokine storms. Interestingly enough, there's a gentleman with I think the author's name is Mohammed. There's probably 5 or 6 papers from this gentleman on using THC to stop that cytokine storm dead in its tracks. And they specifically will take things like SAB, and they even studied this in SAB in spike protein from SARS-CoV-2, throw it into animal models. The mice die, 100% of the mice die without this, and they put THC in, and then bang. Now, I don't want to scare anybody because they're putting this in at really insane concentrations, and it's a different scenario than what's going on with the vax, right? But it's just as a model, it's an interesting study that these cytokine storms that get thrown up by this in some rare subpopulation of the patients, because obviously there's been hundreds of millions of these vaccines given, and not everyone's having these issues. So we're talking about a really rare instance. In your case, it sounds like you've got a lot more. The numbers might be higher than rare, but I'm sorry, my screen just messed up here.
No worries. We're just appreciating.
Sorry, I hit my keyboard. But the where was it? Oh yeah. So anyway, they're just interesting studies because they show that THC has some effect on this and it inhibits it. So the cytokine storm thing, the cannabinoids seem to be a very good thing for. You can also go and Google up now a handful of papers on CBD and THC and the use of cannabinoids in this, and they have varying properties from anti-inflammatory properties to prevent these cytokine storms to stopping the viral replication. But this one thing of tachycardia with THC might actually be really counterindicated with anyone who's having like a myocarditis issue. I mean, that's the only thing I could pin it on. But I'm not a cardiologist. I'm not a physician. I'm just like trying to connect dots from all the papers I read about this stuff. And in general, I felt very confident through this whole COVID thing that the cannabis community would be probably the luckiest bunch there is because of all this evidence that the cannabinoids seem to work so well at damping down the inflammation. But this is kind of out of left field. I didn't expect this. This is something that's worth, I think, putting a lot more scrutiny on because tachycardia has been documented with THC. I've had it myself. I mean, I tend to want usually more balanced strains because I do have heart issues, and tachycardia is not something that's really pleasant.
So here's let me layer something onto that you may or may not be aware of. So I did a bunch of work around how to exploit chemically jamming a crowbar in your CB1 receptor and then ramming more cannabinoids through there until it wants to process it. So we figured out a couple of different proprietary solutions to that problem on both the CB1 and CB2 receptor that allowed me to put 10 to 20 milligrams into people and make them forget what their name is, right? Really small doses. I did it to myself. Just to preface this is to tell you how much I believe in my own science on this. I took 20 milligrams. When I got to a gas station, we all dosed except for the driver, okay, because we still had to get there, obviously. I dosed my 20 milligrams under my tongue with a sublingual, and then walked into the gas station, forgot why I was there. Then went, oh yeah, I went to get beer. Walked up to the case, forgot again. Figured out why I was there, grabbed 2 cases, walked like 1 step out the door and went, oh, I got to pay for this. Walked back in, apologized profusely, paid for it, walked back out, and couldn't remember how I got there, where I was, what my own name was, after taking 20 milligrams less than 5 minutes later.
What did you do to juice up the THC? Did you put it in some other carrier or?
Put it in a sublingual with a carrier that delivers it very fast.
Okay.
Some of my magic that I do for all my beverages and sublinguals that I do for my own tech. I'm happy to talk about that with you.
Yeah, sure.
Situation. But that's the type of stuff where I would love to see that type of tech. But one of the side effects, or long story short, one of the side effects that we found was in 15 plus minus % of the population, when you hit people that fast with THC, you break the speed limit. And by break the speed limit, I mean they suddenly have a cardiac thing where their heart rate is faster. Now, if you take that same patient and you give them a dab or a bong rip
okay, or a hit off a steamroller, they have the coughing and the biomechanical association with that intake of that chemical, okay? So it's not mentally panicking to have a change in heart rate because you have coughing, you have that
Right.
biomechanical process. If I put something under my tongue and a couple minutes later my heart rate changes, that freaks people the fuck out.
Yeah.
And it's not because something's wrong, it's the same exact effect as coughing or having that intake experience where that suddenly is getting into you, right? So it's the same experience, but you don't have that biomechanical association, so it's panic inducing because you don't have that physical association with the event, even though it's subconscious. So that also has been something where we had to kind of dial back the bioavailability to bring it below that what we called speed limit internally, to bring it back into that comfort zone for most patients, to get rid of that 15%, portion of the population that was like, whoa, too much. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, the only thing I can imagine that might help this, obviously seeking, talking to some cardiologists about the myocarditis and what they have for that. But all these other recipes I've been hearing that people have been using for COVID symptoms probably should apply to if there's any post-vaccine dress, because they are putting in a spike protein, which is, I think, the most damaging part of the virus. That's what's in the vaccine, is they're loading you up with that, so your immune system sees that next time and never suffers from it. But I've been reading all of these other nutraceutical things that seem to help with this. I've seen things from in the vitamin D front that are really promising. I've seen there's some really interesting work actually on psilocybin in this area. Not directly to SARS, but to there is fluoxetine in SARS. There's like 5 papers out on using an SSRI to knock out SARS. It like stops the replication. They think it's related to the dopa decarboxylase, which is this gene that gets co-expressed with ACE2 receptors, and that's involved in serotonin. But there's studies now in New England Journal of Medicine and other places that fluoxetine is knocking out SARS replication. Anyone in the mushroom space knows that psilocybin is a safer alternative to these SSRIs, and that may play some role in what's going on with recovery on this. It certainly seems to be playing a role in preventing people getting really sick from it. So I would assume that if there's any chronic symptoms of this post-vaccination, that maybe the same things that are used to treat the symptoms of the virus are going to be at play with some of the long effects on this on the vaccine. But
it's really bizarre, just to touch on that, because this is eye-opening to me. All of a sudden, there's a lot of issues with cannabinoids and SSRIs, and the fact that this all lines up in that same kind of space is very much strange for sure.
Yeah, have you seen the same things with SSRIs? They're a slightly different way to change serotonin levels, right? They're inhibitors of the reuptake, so that you get more serotonin in the cleft, whereas psilocybin is actually an agonist that mimics it, and you're not messing with the reuptake of it. Do you see the same kind of pathophysiology though? With I don't hear that many folks who mix cannabinoids and mushrooms report too many problems, other than maybe having too much of both. But I have heard what you just said, which is that sometimes when people are mixing SSRIs with cannabis, there are, panic attacks or other things that.
Yeah, everyone I've ever known that's had a meltdown on SSRIs, it was right after they smoked or dabbed. Like it's that combo of the two that like sets them off into this other space.
Yeah,
it's too much or whatever. I don't know exactly what's going on, but it seems to be very much a not positive experience for sure.
And they usually take a very long time for them to be effective, the SSRIs. It's not like you can take them and feel them in an hour like you can with psilocybin. It's like, you got to be on this for a couple of weeks for your receptors to all reset themselves, which to me is a much more invasive approach.
On a separate note, since we're touching on genomics of these types of things, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about, you publish a lot of amazing stuff down the psilocybin genomic space lately?
Oh yeah. Oh, so recently we did in collaboration with Oregon CBD, we got a nice reference done for this genome. So many years ago, like in 2016, I actually sequenced this with an Illumina sequencer. It's a short read sequencer, but my father was really sick with cancer at the time, and I was just nervous putting my name to it. That's when I discovered it was almost impossible to publish a genome without a name. which is unfortunate. I really think there should be it should be encouraged. There should be no authorless genomes would be wonderful. So it kind of languished there for a while. I just couldn't risk having that attention on me at the time because I was growing cannabis at the time for my father. He's since passed and those days are gone. But I've since taken a re-interest in this, and some others actually did a really good job publishing on this. And I think in 2018, I think Reynolds and Frick, I think Hoffmeister's group, a bunch of folks, Jason Slott's group, a lot of folks have been contributing to sequencing these things. They sequenced cubensis, and I think there's been some cyanescens that have been sequenced as well. But they're all been done with really short reads, which means the genomes are kind of busted up into a lot of pieces. They're only like 50,000 letters long, the contig length. So they're in hundreds of thousands of pieces. So we hit this with PacBio with these new long read sequencers, and now the genome's in a nice 32 contig set. We can see the telomeres on some of the contigs. We have some chromosomes that look like they're sequenced perfectly from tip to tip. So that's acted as a really nice reference for us. We did that one on the penis envy strain. And then we've been able to go and collect spores. We can't do any RNA-seq because we can't really grow any tissue. The issue right now with where we are in Mass is we can only handle spores and DNA because that stuff is legal. But the tissue is where you start getting into heat. So, but we can sequence shitloads of spores, and we did that. We sequenced 81 different genomes and now have a pre-printout that shows a lot of interesting findings in this. It's still not peer reviewed, so I'll speak cautiously about this, but the going theory in the past has been that there's a psilocybin synthesis cluster that contains 5 to 10 genes in it. And it's compact and it's 20,000 letters long, and this thing horizontally gene transfers around different mushrooms. What's been interesting is there are some outliers to that theory. One is in Massapora, which is in this fungus that infects cicadas and makes them hallucinate. And this one's been in the news quite a bit because the cicadas are out this year. And that pathway seems a bit different. And we've noticed in a couple other of the mushrooms, the psilocybe tampanensis and the galandois, and which I think we did ziracens as well. They don't seem to have these discrete clustered pathways. There's another pathway in those. So the mushrooms have figured out many different ways to skin the psilocybin cat. And that's helping us understand which one of these gene sets are involved in maybe altering the chemical profile. So just like cannabis, these things have an entourage effect. They make psilocybin, they make psilocin, they make originacin, they make baeocystin, norbaeocystin, norpsilocin. So there's a whole portfolio that these things make. And then there's all these monoamine oxidase inhibitors that alter the way your liver metabolizes these things. So there's a lot to unravel there. And what we're trying to do is sort out what variants in that pathway are predicting the chemical expression, much like some of the work we've done in the cannabis space on THC and CBD genetics. So it's a little earlier than it is in the cannabis area, but these are much easier to sequence. We can sequence dozens of these things at a time and get a hell of a lot more. They're not nearly as complicated as the cannabis genome. So I think we're going to see that field advance very quickly in terms of associating which mutations in those genomes are predictive of like the mushrooms that make a lot of baeocystin or mushrooms that have really high psilocybin expression.
So
yeah.
A question from
Go
chat.
ahead.
So could we stack those and make unbelievably potent biochemically diverse psilocybin mushrooms?
I think there's probably going to be a way to, without a doubt, do some directed breeding on them.
Is there a stabilized like equivalent to a polyploidy or something in the mushroom world? Like I honestly know fuck all about fungal genomics, and I know that they're incredibly different than plants. So
yeah, so they tend to have like maybe 10 to 14 chromosomes. They're not nearly as repetitive. They're like 45 million bases, not 800 or 900 million bases in size. So the repeat content is much more manageable. The genomes are much easier to do gene prediction on, and everything's easier in fungi from a genomic standpoint. Now, is there polyploidy? That's a good question. I've not seen a lot of that in the literature yet, but I'm still fairly new to this literature space. So it could be out there. Genetic engineering in it is certainly easier than it is in plants, but I'm not certain I don't think we've exhausted the crossing of these things. I think what tends to happen in that space is they're asexually propagated and people just tend to pick the biggest cap and get spore prints and repeat. But once I think we get a better understanding of which mushrooms have which desirable genes, we'll start crossing them to get the right clamp connections where these things start to share genetics, and then we can really make some new mushrooms. But what I think, what I found in the cannabis space is a lot more people know how to breed that because it's easier to breed than I think in the fungal space, it takes a real special set of hands to know how to, mate these things. We're still trying to figure out the mating types on these things. So cannabis is pretty easy. There's male and female. In fungi, you can have thousands of genders or mating types. And so they don't always mate together. So sometimes crossing them is a lot more of a lottery ticket where you got to, put different types of strains down and see which ones can actually make clamp connections and then follow that through. So it's a little bit more laborious to do the mating, I think, in the fungi space. And it's so easy to collect spores that I think most people are just going with asexual reproduction on these things. So the diversity is much lower in that space at the moment. And that there's not as many strains that you'll find at the banks. However, there are multiple different species that can make these things. So in many ways, while there's less variety to pick from at the spore banks, there's actually a broader genetic distribution. Like in cannabis, we have just cannabis sativa and indica, and they're both only subspecies. But you don't see the cannabinoids outside of cannabis other than like maybe, I think Trema or orientalis is the only other thing they found some of these cannabinoids being made in, right? But it's a very low concentrations. But you get into mushrooms and suddenly you start breaking species boundaries, and there are many different species of mushrooms that make psilocybin. It's much broader in that context. I don't know how well those different species cross, however. I think, I don't think there's been as much work trying to get Azurescens to cross with cubensis and how productive that is. One would think it's probably not very productive given their different species, but I'm always learning stuff from fungal experts that I shouldn't assume what happens in plants is true there. So I know it's an exciting field. I think there's a totally different genetic side of the coin there. And I don't yet really know where it's all going to go, but we're figuring it's time to get those genetics nailed.
I know Aaron had one more question for you before he's got to roll out here soon.
So with mushrooms and the condition that I'm in now, I know you're not a doctor, but do you think it would harm me?
I wouldn't go there on this. I was just throwing that out there, and that I've seen these fluoxetine papers, and I've been really shocked because I never thought of that pathway playing a role in SARS. It blew my mind. And I learned that actually from Peter McCullough at Baylor. He's been speaking about fluoxetine and how that was kind of one of these repurposed drugs that was a shocker. I have no idea what that could be doing in terms of myocarditis risk. And I would seek help from a cardiologist on that front, because I don't want to be gambling with your health here. I'm just really excited about that field. And I thought I'd throw it out there based on some of the information that you guys have been sharing on all these other medicinal plants. I find the field really fascinating.
It's also hyper strain specific. So if you don't really know 100% what it is that you're getting, you have no idea what it is, the chemical makeup of that source, right? So I think that's probably like aside from all of the medical stuff that he's talking about, that's probably the biggest gamble. You have no idea what it is that you're.
That's kind of what I thought.
It's not like cannabis where you can send it off for a test, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that is true. It's harder to get these things tested. There's fewer labs. I think there's one in Oakland I've heard of, Hyphae Labs, I think, that's doing some testing on these things. And that's a good point. The mushroom diversity is large, and the chemical expression shouldn't be assumed to be just.
How many secondary compounds are present that are playing a role beyond psilocybin and psilocybin? I mean, certainly you have natural MAOI, MAOs, and all the other different compounds that are in there. So do you want to touch on that, just on how many?
Well, there's at least 6. So, I mean, there's originacin, there's baeocystin, there's norbaeocystin, there is psilocin, norpsilocin, and psilocybin are really the main ones that have been documented. I'm sure there's other ones that a real fungal expert will school me on, that knows things that are outside of that are probably shared in lion's mane and a lot of these other, beneficial compounds that they speak about in other mushrooms. They could be there as well. But yeah, and then there's the monoamine oxidase inhibitors, which alter the metabolism of them. So this is just that's just a field that I found to be extraordinarily fascinating, and I don't know how to intersect that with the cardiology risk that you have right now. I've not heard of people getting tachycardia on those things, but I've got no evidence to know that it's going to actually address any of the issues you have. That's
it's also not something that's a whole lot of written down documentation.
No. There's nothing published on that. There's only published. We're drawing strings here between fluoxetine and SARS. And isn't it fascinating that maybe mushrooms could solve this? But this is total tin hat. Where does this actually play a role? I do think see if you can get the troponin levels checked and take a look at some of Peter McCullough's work, because he's been paying close attention to this myocarditis risk. And I wonder who else in the field is good on the cardiology front and the cannabinoids. Like he may not be as well versed on the tachycardia effects on cannabinoids, but maybe I don't know. Maybe Dustin Sulak has kept up on this. I haven't spoken to him in a while. He may have had some experience in this area. So, and I'll check with Bonnie if she's seen anything as well. I know she's been. She'd be another good voice to hear too, because I think she's been very pro-vaccine on this, and so I think she's paying some close attention to that, and may have some experience with. It's always good to get people that are for and against, and just hear both sides. There's so much data out there. There's like 800,000 papers that came out in SARS. No one person's read them all, so everyone's got an opinion that's different.
Sure. And see, that's the thing I was telling Stephen is like the doctor that I see now. He's a good doctor, but I just feel like he doesn't know what caused it. I feel like he probably has an idea of what it is, but he has no way of explaining to me why. And that's really what I'm trying to figure out.
I'll send a note around to some of this is interesting. I'll send a note to some of the other place we should probably ping this off of is the Society for Cannabis Clinicians. Now, some of these societies may be very apprehensive talking about vaccine side effects, because it is one sure guaranteed way to get you deplatformed, and they're already on thin ice being cannabinoid physicians. So they may not want to entertain this very publicly, but they may have some experience with this amongst their physicians and nurses, and privately have something to share. So it's certainly something I'm dialed into some of those networks, and I can try and circulate this as saying, hey, has anyone seen this? And what are people doing about it?
Yeah, because I mean, it's not that I don't feel that the medicine works, but even with taking medicine every day and not smoking, I'm still having, I guess we'll call it attacks, to where
right.
I feel my heart rate increasing when I'm not doing anything. I can be sitting still and my heart rate's just steadily going up.
So that sounds like that could be AFib too. I have AFib, and I carry around one of these cardio things. It's like $99. They're probably cheaper now. They could be $50 for all I know, but they're a device that you can put your thumbs on, and it sings like Bluetooth to your phone and reads your EKGs. And I found that to be really helpful, that whenever I have my heart go out of rhythm, I can just tap that on and then send it to my doctor and say, hey, what's going on? Anything I should be doing? And usually it's pretty good at detecting whether you're in tachycardia, whether you're in bradycardia, whether you're having atrial fibrillation or ventral fibrillations or VTAC. So that's an interesting tool that might help just capture more data on this. You could be in a new space here, and so the more data you collect, the better. And that may help any of the physicians kind of track this. Particularly if you can tie it to whenever you're taking your meds, there may be some cycles to this, whether it's in the morning or evening or tied to dietary consumption.
It's usually I usually notice it more in the evening than I do in the morning time, but it's almost always when I'm not doing anything. You know what I mean? Like when I'm being sitting still or laying down, that's really when I notice it the most.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. That's there is some of that that's going around, so it's good that you're getting the word out. And You know, again, I want to reemphasize the other one here as well. I'm not an anti-vax either. Most of my family's vaccinated. We're taking our time on this COVID one because we feel like many of our folks just had it, and we don't believe, getting vaccinated on top of having natural immunity does anything. And I myself have been staring, sitting on hold, watching the data very carefully because of my AFib situation. And atrial fibrillation can lead to clots, and so a lot of these things have had these reports of clots. So I've just been like, I think I'll take the ivermectin route if I get sick and wait it out. The good news is the virus seems to be attenuating. Most of the variants I've been reading about, they have higher transmissibility, but they have lower virulence, and that's what viruses do. Is they find a way to not impact the host as much so they can transmit it more easily. And then they become more and more benign, but they spread very quickly. And that's what I think we're seeing with a lot of the variants that are coming out now. Is it's starting to get endemic, and there's enough immunity out there from the vaccine plus from natural immunity that it's going to be a very rare event. And we'll see. I'm sure there'll be another wave in the fall, but it's going to be mostly a PCR hallucination. I think it will be very hard for us to see it translate into hospitalizations. So that's what's unknown right now is spike vaccine. They're only, I think what a lot of immunologists were hoping they do is not have a spike only vaccine. It's such a small component size of the virus that if it mutates around, it's easier to mutate around a spike only vax. If they have other proteins from the virus, they'd have a more thorough vax that would be a little bit more durable, like natural immunity, but they're going to come up with probably boosters and stuff that deal with that. And who knows, what could happen if you have the vaccine is that gives you enough of the protection that if you do get naturally hit, you may not have ever noticed it. And then you build natural immunity that way to the whole thing. And so I'm quite hopeful that that's actually what's going to occur, is that all of these scare tactics about the variants escaping the vaccine, I think are just that. It's the media kind of going nuts. But if it really limits the symptoms, next season, many people who are vaccinated, who have that partial protection, are going to then get the virus itself and then build full protection against it off the natural one and probably not even notice it. So I think we're around the corner on this, and it's going to be over shortly, and there'll be less of this to worry about. But the stories like yours, I think, are important to share because they are getting suppressed, and other people are going to want to know about them. And it has a big impact in medicine because a lot of people rely on cannabinoids, and this is something that no one saw coming. I certainly didn't see it coming.
Yeah, me either. Last question for you. So my blood pressure monitor that I have, it actually has an irregular heart detection deal on it. Would that be similar to what you're talking about?
I don't know off the hand if it has an EKG, but if it says it's got, that's what you want to look for, is whether it's got an EKG. The one that I have is a Cardia, Kardia. You can get them at Amazon, and I think they're like $59 now, and they're well worth it. They work really well, and they give you the information that you can email. Now, blood pressure is usually a cuff, and I don't know if they always put EKGs inside the cuffs. I've not seen that, but it's possible. So that's this device won't measure your blood pressure. It'll just measure your electrical rhythm effectively.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty much everything I've got.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. You want anything else you want to plug before you roll out?
No. Thank you for everything. Thank you for giving me at least a direction to go in.
Yeah, check out Peter McCullough's work. What other physicians are on this? I'm trying to think through. Pierre Corey is an interesting one because he was on Brett Weinstein's cast recently. He knows a lot about ivermectin, but the other gentleman, Dr. McCullough, he's like one of the world's leading cardiologists. So I think he's probably the best go-to guy on COVID and cardiology. He's got a really good head, and he's not biased in that he's all vaccine or anti-vaccine. He's open to monoclonal antibodies. He's open to remdesivir. He's open to dexamethasone. He's open to hydroxychloroquine. All of it. He just wants to help people. He doesn't care about which one of these things works. But he's certainly sensitized to the fact that this myocarditis thing is getting buried for whatever reason. And so stories like yours, I'm sure he'll be more attentive to.
Well, just to highlight the censorship, Facebook took down all but 2 of the posts that we made on this episode. Reddit took it down. I posted it on 4 separate Discords, 2 of which I have personal access to the admin logs, and it mysteriously disappeared because it mentioned COVID and problems. And we worded it extremely lightly. Like, we just said, hey, here's a gentleman who got the vaccine. He can't smoke cannabis anymore. Find out more once he comes on and see if it applies to you or not. It wasn't any type of scaremongering. There was no anti-vax. Again, we prefaced the whole episode with, hey, neither one of us are anti-vax. I have probably more vaccines than most of the people listening to this show because I've traveled to South America and Africa.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You've traveled widely, so you're probably in the same boat, right? So I am far from an
I had to get them all for research just to get in the labs. I'm a pincushion.
Exactly. So to call any of us on the show anti-vaxxers is just completely inaccurate. So none of us are anti-vaxxers. Just to reiterate that one more time on the show, because I'm sure this episode will attempt to be used to justify that type of behavior.
Yes. Yeah.
But none of us also think that vaccines are blanketly Jesus and incapable of harm, which I think is equally stupid. You have to look at your own personal health problems and figure out, is this particular version right for me, or do I need to look at other options? And that's all we're saying.
They have polarized this discussion, unfortunately, because you don't talk about other medicine this way. You don't talk about whether you're pro-antibiotic or anti-antibiotic. You talk about penicillin. You talk about amoxicillin. The same thing's true with vaccines. You talk about MMR. You talk about these Moderna things. They're all different biological entities, and you cannot give them a hall pass just because they're in the vaccine camp. You couldn't have said it better. And unfortunately, you might need to get this on one of those blockchain systems. I don't know. Have you tried Odyssey? Odyssey's like I think it runs on IPFS, and it has some type of blockchain behind it that helps prevent these videos from getting taken down. I see a lot of the folks that get censored off the other platforms end up over there.
I'll be frankly honest with you. Let me turn the torch off. I'm shocked that we haven't been censored already by YouTube for this episode, period. Because I've watched other people try to do this episode or something similar and then be immediately after 15 minutes taken down.
Wow, it's live, like real time. They're listening.
Yeah, no, that happened on Discord earlier today. In fact, I posted on Rasta Jeff's Discord and on Do Grows and on my own, and it was removed from all but one of the 4 servers I uploaded it to. And why it didn't do it to the other one, I don't know.
Yeah, I have the same thing going on. I mean, I found Facebook and LinkedIn are horrible. They censor me all the time. Twitter is a little bit more open, but then there are these mobs of people on Twitter that are constantly reporting me to try and get me canceled. So I've got a cancel culture after me over there.
No, but none of it. I mean, if anyone sits down and talks to Aaron in person, like it's pretty like, and I knew Aaron long before any of this even was that's why I wanted to bring him on, is because I worked with Aaron long before we were ever, long before this topic was ever a problem. So, that's not the basis of our relationship in any way, shape, or form. He's not invited on the show because of that. I knew him long before any of this happened, and I watched his life change and how much that scared the shit out of me. That's why I wanted him on the show, but it took us a while to line up schedules to get him on. That's why we're on a Tuesday show instead of a Thursday show today. So,
got it. All right. Well, it's almost 1 o'clock here, guys. I
had one more question I wanted to ask you before I let you go, if you're open for it.
Sure.
So, in regards to, mosaic virus.
Oh yeah.
What are you seeing in cannabis?
So, not much in that. God, I wish we had a grow. We made. I know right now that folks are digging on a tobacco mosaic virus and another tobacco. I think it's tobacco streak virus.
Cucumber and alfalfa mosaic virus we're seeing, or at least.
Yeah, so we're making assays for them, but I feel like we're Helen Keller on this. We can make the assays, but we have no place to deploy them to know how well they work in real life samples. I mean, we're working with a couple grows and nurseries out in California and in other jurisdictions, but it's all kind of working. We can't see and touch the phenotypes, you know, we're kind of, you know, working through these other partners to try and see if these assays work and how they work. The hops latent viroid is killing it. There's people using that all over the place now. There, likewise, the lettuce chlorosis virus, people are using everywhere. But, you know, outside those two, we still have a bunch of we have 6 other R&D assays that I'll have to get you the list of all the viruses that they're playing around with. They've got the assays running, so they work on controls in our lab, but we don't know how to sample it on the plant. Do we do the same thing we do with hops latent viroid and just do hole punches all over the place, or do we have to go for stems? You know, all that biology is yet to be worked out on the other ones. So you said you've got a few that you may run into?
I have a new one. In fact, you know what? The hell with it. Let me throw a picture up and let me really throw you a curveball here. Give me 2 seconds to pull up a picture. All right. Oh, hold on. Make sure no one sees anything we don't want to see. All right. There we go. This has been the new. So I've seen a lot of cucumber beetle attack this year, and more cucumber beetles than I've ever seen before. And this is the mystery, exactly what species this is, because I have not found anyone that has ever seen anything that looks quite like that.
Now, do you think that's bacterial, fungal, or viral?
I have no idea. My first guess, based on the fact that it's a secondary infection from a cucumber beetle, because all of the plant, you can see their poop right there. The main, and I'm seeing this at lots of different outdoor farms in Oklahoma this year. This is not a specific to one farm, but it's only certain plants and certain varietals that seem to get hit much harder by this secondary infection that I have not seen before. And I've been in Oklahoma for 2 years, you know, to some extent. So, and with a year, you know, kind of in between there, in between seasons in Africa. But this is the strangest thing that I've seen in a long time. But all the plants that look like this have cucumber beetles on them. So, all
right, so the thing to do would probably be to sequence both the microbiome and the beetle.
Yep.
And that might try to, then maybe you'll pinpoint the virus. The thing is, oh God, you got to do this with RNA, because there could be RNA viruses. And sometimes beetle gut microbiomes are a mess. They've got all sorts of stuff in them. And then the fungal and bacterial microbiomes are pretty easy to do. That you just kind of shotgun sequence them and you can get good profiles. But it's the viruses that get a little bit tricky. Getting those and getting them out of the beetles are, because the beetle, I'm assuming these beetles aren't very big, right?
They're half-inch, quarter-inch, half-inch. They're decent size.
Okay, all right.
Hold on, let me stop sharing for a second. I'll show you a picture from the same plant that it was observed on. Hold on. But this is some of the stranger damage that I've seen in a while, and I'm seeing this all over the place suddenly, and I did not see these guys before. And I'm not talking about just the little corner of the state that I'm in, but I'm talking about all over. And these guys had a couple of other issues too. Have
you tried testing them for the other it doesn't look like your typical HLV symptom, but
I have no, but I'm only seeing this weird secondary. What my best guess is fungal infection when these guys are also on the plant. I'm not, or
like this brown stuff that's showing up after the bite marks.
Yeah, and then it spreads. That's the beginning.
I see.
Yeah, but that's something I have not observed before in any kind of scale. And I've looked at 400 plus acres for the past 3 or 4 years, every year or more. So. And that's the first time I've seen anything quite like that. And it does, I'll show you another one. Again, I'm not going to reveal the location in Oklahoma, but it was Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
That's the top of the leaf. It almost looks like mite damage, but there's no mite.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like it's something's popping a lot of holes in it and it's getting chlorotic.
Yeah, there was something else feeding on it, but again, when I scoped it, there was no live mite. Now, they definitely had spider mites earlier in the season, and that was another issue separately, but the secondary infection has been an issue that has been kind of a mystery for sure. And I've seen it on multiple farms across southern Oklahoma that I did not see in previous years.
Is it on hemp plants by chance? Like if you can get us leaves, we could do something.
In cannabis, I've seen it on both. So it seems to be pretty agnostic between the two.
So the benefit of that is that we can do a hell of a lot more diagnostics on the leaves from hemp plants. The problem is that once it's a THC plant, it's hard for you to ship us something, which means the RNA is probably going to get the RNA just degrades very quickly. So, but the first thing we could do out of the gate is we would just screen it for first bacteria and fungi. We're going to find bacteria. You always find some, so you don't know if it's the causative version of it. But the first thing we'd see if there's anything that stands out at really high copy number, we'd then comb through the literature to say, okay, are any of these seen in other crops with the same phenotype? If that ends up with kind of a confusion or goose egg, if there's just too many microbes there and we don't know which one's causative, the harder thing to do, but I think might be more fruitful, is looking at the RNA side of it, because if it is a virus that's getting vectored around by the beetle, it'll probably be an RNA virus. And those tend to be those seem to be a little bit easier to shake out of the background of the RNA that's there. It tends to be the predominant RNA that's present. The most highly expressed one tends to be the viral one. So,
cucumber beetles are they're well documented to vector quite a bit.
Yeah, indeed. They're just tricky to get DNA out of because they have these chitinase shells, which are chitin shells, which are hard to sometimes crack. And sometimes you got to get in there and dissect these things and go to the gut of them to find the microbe. I mean, some people might just grind them entirely up and go that route. I haven't done that before, so I'd probably want to be teaming up with somebody down there. I think you have there's someone that's been publishing, I think in Oklahoma on cannabis pathogens. I think I met her and I need to reach out to her. She might be able to weigh in on this.
Ooh, because I will put bugs in alcohol and get them in the mail tomorrow.
Let me look that up because I got to Google that, but if I find it, I'll send it to you. Because I think there's someone down there. They've been documenting a bunch of other fungal things, so they would probably love to hear about this.
Another one that I've highly documented, Septoria. There's two different species of Septoria that express that I've noticed in Oklahoma specifically, and that I would imagine are also in Texas and regionally climate similar areas. And then also bean thrips. Bean thrips seem to be a much bigger problem. I never saw them outside of Oklahoma, and all of a sudden in Oklahoma, I see them almost as often as flower thrips or onion thrips. Wow. So they're another species that I see.
And they're probably a vector as well, right?
Yep, exactly. Another one that vectors stuff. Okay, thanks guys for coming on. You want to say goodbye?
Thank you.
Hey, I hope you feel better, and I'll forward you any of those names if it helps. Okay. I think they can weigh in on this much more intelligently than I can.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Have a good night. I'm going to check out too, guys. I'm fading.
All right, well, we'll wrap the episode up. Why don't you tell everybody how to find you and a little bit about the services and stuff that you provide. You really are one of the best resources for the cannabis community in terms of valuable knowledge. You can provide people with some of the disease and pathogen testing that other people cannot, and as well as documentation of their own genomics that they've been working on. So you want to give it a minute to talk about.
Sure. So we have Medicinal Genomics has a suite of tools you can use for breeding. There's an 85,000 SNP array that we have that has SNPs that are tiled across the Jamaican line genome references that we built. That's been very helpful. A few people have already used that to find markers of interest so that they can breed for Varen cultivars or autoflower cultivars. We have some sequencing tools as well if you want to do direct sequencing. Oh, thank you. And then we make a suite of PCR assays that can screen for viruses, that can screen for total yeast and molds, for total aerobic counts, bacteria. There's a set of the assays that are more targeted toward what the labs have to test from a regulatory standpoint. There's also a set of assays that breeders and nurseries want to use, which are less regulated but probably more important for yield. We've done a lot of total yeast and mold sequencing. That's probably the one area of our portfolio that is under constant revision because they're very different. The plating things that you see, like in my backdrop here, produce very different results depending on what type of plating mechanism you use. If you go from the one we have here is DRBC, if you do something with PDA or with 3M, you'll find very different counts and very different microbial profiles. So we've been trying to document that and publish all of the microbiomes that we can find on cannabis, so we can make those tools just better in general. We're in the process of putting a lot of those through AOAC approval right now, and some of those are starting to pop out for Aspergillus and E. coli and Salmonella. So yeah, you can find a lot of the work we do there. We just there's a podcast of mine that was up, about an hour-long discussion about the total yeast and mold challenges that are in the field. That just went live last week. I'll point people to that. We have another paper that we did in our AOAC study that sequenced 45 different fungal and bacterial genomes that were picked off of plates like this you see in the background to catalog what's going on in the cannabis space. I think one interesting thing that came out of that, as a side note, is there's more than one species of botrytis on cannabis. We were always thinking it was botrytis cinerea, but we're finding that it's a little bit more diverse than that, which is kind of cool. And then I think outside of that, we also manage the CanMed conference. So we try to organize a lot of scientific talks and presentations every year in Pasadena. Didn't happen last year due to COVID, but it's going to happen this year in late September. So join us there if you can. There'll be much more of this to be discussed. Oh, there you go. Not CanMed is different than CanMed. We get that confusion all the time. Sorry, we don't do licenses. Yeah, the two ends though. So you know what's cool about this is all of the videos from the last 4 conferences are now live on the CanMed archive there. They're free for anyone to download. And you can search them now. We've always had them live, but it was hard to search them. Now they're searchable and live. So you can kind of comb through them and see various presentations.
How do people find that? I'm sorry.
I think CanMed archive right there, the big hit to learn more there. That should be searchable. Down one more on this, right in the center, just low right there. Bingo. Yes. CanMed archives, video archives. There you go. So you should be able to see, there's probably there's hours and hours. Each year was probably 2 days. There's probably 4 years there. So there's, I can't do math at 1 a.m., but there's you can fill yourself with a week of watching videos there.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for joining us. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before?
No, thank you for the airtime there, and it's always good catching up with you. It's been too long. I kind of have been falling off the podcast circuit for a while. It's just busy with things with the
just
pandemic.
To close this out, do you want to give people a preview of what you're working on for the Aquaponic Cannabis Conference in November? Because we had a super cool talk about that you're going to talk about the genomics of some of the soil stuff and the root stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that escaped my attention. Yeah, so some of that is probably related to these microbiome surveys we've been doing, and we've been sequencing all these different microbes that grow on the plant. We've also been looking actually at other fungi in the process. Since we've been sequencing all of these yeast and mold, we throw in some of these cubensis strains, but I don't think they have much of a role necessarily in cannabis growth. So it'll probably be more about what microbiomes we have found, and the role of some of these chitinases and TLPs that we're finding are playing a role in some powdery mildew resistance, and whether or not that will extend to other plants. The ones that we're finding in Jamaican lion are interesting, but when we try to PCR those same genes in other cannabis crops, it looks like there's more than one way to skin the powdery mildew resistance problem. And I think that whatever we found in Jamaican lion is probably fairly private to it. And I'm sure we're going to find other resistance markers and other genetic lines that are different than what this thing has done. But we have cloned those genes, these chitinase and TLP genes, and they do actually, they're very productive enzymes. They've actually improved our total yeast and mold kits for the cannabis safety testing field, because we now have better enzymatic lysis of all of these yeast and molds by taking the enzymes we found in cannabis and using them as a tool for monitoring the molds that can actually grow on cannabis. So I'll probably hit on that topic the most, because I find one of the most fascinating stories is that we were able to put some use to enzymes in powdery mildew resistant plants to improve the testing pipeline for yeast and mold testing in cannabis.
That's super awesome. We'll have to have you back on the show and chat with you more on more rabbit holes when we have time on the genomics side.
Yeah. I'm going to look up that plant you mentioned, man. That one's fascinating.
At least 15 questions instantly after that last paragraph that you just said. So we'll have to have you back on again soon.
Happy to do it. Yeah, sorry, I kind of fumbled tonight. I just got distracted on something else with the kids.
The fact that you managed to come in at the end here, I'm super blessed to even have you here. So thank you so much for helping support some of the stuff that he was talking about. I think a lot of people look at people like him and don't really take it seriously. But then at the same time, hearing from someone like yourself that has that type of deep background and then has also studied this specific virus for the better part of a year because of what the heck is going on. And then also some of this different stuff that you're personally working on helps bring a lot of legitimacy to the fact that this is a real situation. This is really happening. We do need to figure out why and then prevent other people from having the same experience that he did. It doesn't mean that you have to have some type of zealotry or fervor around for or against or anything else. We just need to figure out why it is that happened to him so we never happen again. And that's the whole point of the
And are there genetic predispositions to these things? I mean, there's too much of this black and white, like all or nothing. You're either for it or against it. When it's like we should be thinking about personalized medicine here. Everyone isn't getting myocarditis. A fraction of people are. I don't know the true number because the measuring tools suck right now. But it's happening. It's been documented. We got to understand why and who and how frequent. The only way we're going to get to that is by getting some of these stories out and collecting this because. Any really ardent vaccine person the first thing they'll tell you is you can't trust VAERS. It's like, okay, well then we got to build something else. And maybe we're going to crowdsource it through stories like this because we're not just going to blindly take all these things. We've got to actually study the biology. We're ethically obligated to do that given, what's going on. So this is
and thank you for being part of the medical community that's willing to have these type of conversations because so much of the medical community is not even willing to have this type of.
They're scared. They're going to get censored, their license taken. It's crazy what's going on.
Exactly, and that was the entire point of the whole episode. Is hey, there are people that are getting sick from this, but they are very much a minority. They meet a very specific set of criteria, and we've seen 5 separate people between Aaron and myself. That's enough for me personally to want to at the very least get the word out. And the fact that I have never even heard that there's any type of even chance of cannabis allergy from this is insane, considering the fact that I know someone personally that's having their life flip upside down because of it.
Yeah, right? How frequent it is. I mean, it's a very frequently consumed drug. So
exactly,
this should be, and there's enough vaccines out there. There should be enough numbers.
Exactly.
So it's a fair point. Well, so let's see how far this thing goes before it gets cut, deleted, and kicked into orbit.
Well, and my point is that if you are experiencing similar symptoms to Aaron, you're not crazy. They're real, and that is happening to you. And there might be a solution, and that's why we like to have people like Kevin on, because you know what? He gave Aaron a whole bunch of direction as to what is really going on with him, because the doctors he had previously been exposed to had no fucking idea. At least he gives them some direction now. It's not medical advice, nor is anything on this podcast. Nothing is medical advice. I'm not a doctor. We're not giving you medical advice in any way, shape, or form, just as a disclaimer. But at least he has a direction to research now, because before tonight, Aaron didn't. I'm just gonna be straight with you. Like, the fact that I even reached out to Kevin tonight gave him far more direction than he had before the beginning of the day when he woke up today. So thank you, Kevin, so much for taking the time to come on the show. Thank you for taking the time to do this type of episode that is kind of controversial. I'm frankly shocked that we haven't been taken down from YouTube, even trying to stream this, but we'll re-upload it and we'll see what happens. I have never had to moderate as much of the chat as I have after making the initial "hey, this episode is happening" post as I have for this episode today, including the ones that mentioned the P word, Phylos, even though controversial as this one. So it really is kind of an interesting thing, and something frankly, I'm passionate about. I know someone that personally was an employee working under me that has had his life turned upside down, Aaron. when he was working under me when I was the farm manager at the farm he was at. And for that type of personal connection to know him before and after, we got to bring this story out because it's not getting mentioned. It's not getting any airtime, and it needs to be told because other people are experiencing it and they need to feel like, you know,
They're not crazy. They're going to get gaslit if we don't bring this out. Yeah.
Exactly. So thanks so much for coming on.
Cheers. Thank you as well. And look forward to the next one.
Take care.
All right. All right. Take care.
Thanks everybody for coming on the show. You can check out myself over at Growing with Fishes podcast and Potent Ponics podcast on your favorite media outlet. Also, please make sure you go subscribe to AP Meds. Marty is definitely having a heavy week this week, so show him some extra love this week. Not going to share his business, but show him some love. That's all I got to say. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to listen to this podcast. You can find us SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, all the things. And we'll see you guys again, hopefully Thursday. I'm going to try